The following meeting will be conducted by electronic means in accordance with the Senator Byron M. Baer Open Public Meetings Act, which explicitly permits a public body to conduct a meeting electronically during a state of emergency. Bill A3850/S2294, signed by the governor, allows public bodies to conduct meetings and provide notice by electronic means during periods of emergency in response to Executive Orders 103 and 107, declaring a public health emergency and state of emergency, and directing residents to quarantine and practice social distancing. Any questions may be directed to the Zoning Board Secretary during business hours at 732-502-5711 or via email at michelle.alonso@cityofasburypark.com. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster and Asbury Park Press. All notices are on file with the board secretary. In addition, a notice regarding this virtual meeting and instructions were published in the Asbury Park Press and the City of Asbury Park website. A copy of that notice is on file with the board secretary. The notices and the conduct of this meeting are in accordance with the guidelines for virtual meetings issued by the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. In addition, you can test out the functionality of Zoom, including speaker, microphone on your computer or other internet connected device at zoom.us.test. When the public question or comment portion of a case you wish to speak about is open to the public, you must click the raise hand button. If using a computer or mobile device, or dial *9 if on a telephone in order to indicate to the board secretary that you wish to speak. After clicking raise hand on your computer or dialing *9 on your telephone, listen for your name or last four numbers of your phone number. Permission to speak will then be granted to you. During the public comment session only, you will be sworn in before your comments. Each speaker will have 4 minutes to speak, and when your time expires, your microphone will be muted. You cannot participate in public comment or question unless you are attending the virtual meeting through Zoom, either by computer or phone access. All microphones of public users will be muted during the meeting, except as set forth above during the public comment and question portion of each agenda item. As required by NJAC 5:39-1.4F, a member of the public may alternately submit written comments by 4 p.m. on the Thursday prior to each regular meeting listed above. Such written comments may be read at the public meeting only if they are consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act and guiding regulations pertaining to an agenda item, are consistent with the Zoning Board of Adjustment bylaws, which restrict public comment to 4 minutes per person. Written comments may be emailed to michelle.alonso@cityofasburypark.com or mailed to Michelle Alonso, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Asbury Park City Hall, 1 Municipal Plaza, Asbury Park, New Jersey, 07712, or deposited in the drop box identified by the city seal located at the Asbury Park City Hall, 1 Municipal Plaza, main entrance, Asbury Park, New Jersey. Please call us to attendance.
Okay. Bear with me, folks. If I make a mistake, run me out of town. Okay. Daniel Harris. Dan's not here yet. Okay. Brittany
Sorry,
Ashman.
be a little late.
That's fine. Brittany Ashman.
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez.
Here.
Jill Potter. Jill, you're muted.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Tim Slick. Tim?
I'm here.
Okay, you're present. Okay. Catherine Minervini.
Here.
Thank you. Bonnie Knock.
Here.
All right. Russell Lewis.
Computer there.
Here. And Christopher
Yeah,
Avalone.
Here.
Okay. Everyone is here with the exception of Dan, and we'll hopefully have him join in before we start the applications. Next. Okay, the minutes would be next. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman, you're up.
So just to reiterate, Irina is now on maternity leave. She probably won't be back until February. we have to, the first part of the meeting, I suggest we pass a motion to make a temporary board secretary. So I'll make a motion to make Michelle Alonso temporary board secretary while Arena is on maternity leave.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
We have one opposition. Did somebody vote no? Okay, let me do this again. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Michelle will be temporary secretary until such time as Irina comes back.
Okay. And so we just to do some housekeeping issues. First, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 8th, 2020.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Motion to approve the minutes passed.
And as you can see, the minutes are up there and they are labeled Exhibit B2.
Right. The next item, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe the resolutions.
Okay,
That's what I see on the agenda here.
yes. So
Okay.
I will, since I'm recused from that, I will
Well,
turn it
you're
over
not
to.
recused from the resolution for public bodies. You're recused from the new singular. The first one I have on my agenda is the resolution by the board adopting procedures for
Virtual meetings. Yeah, maybe you can give a quick synopsis of what's
Yeah.
going on regarding that, Jack, and so the
Yes.
rest of the board.
Yes, in the
Okay.
last 2 weeks or so, or actually, I think it was September 24th or thereabouts, the Department of Community Affairs, unbeknown to most people, including many other board attorneys that I've spoken to as recently as today, passed amended rules and regulations for virtual meetings during the pandemic and the state of emergency. They were actually an upgrade or a supplement to what was originally passed back last winter, which is what we've been operating under. The regulations require to do a few things, some of which I agree with, some of which I believe are perfectly legal, and some of which that I think are very illegal and beyond the powers of the DCA to impose. And during the next 4 to 6 weeks, I believe they will be receiving comments, and I am sure that the bar, especially zoning and planning board attorneys and experienced land practitioners, are going to have something to say about it. Be that as it may. What we were first required to do, which is perfectly fine, every year, as you may know, in December, we send to both the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster a list of all of our meeting dates, times, and places of the meetings for the upcoming calendar year. And it says that the meetings are going to take place at City Hall. Well, lo and behold, we don't have meetings taking place at City Hall anymore, so they've now imposed a requirement, which is more of a reminder that since we've changed the locus or the location of the meetings to that being virtual, that we should republish the notice within to the newspaper. So as of the 7th, there's a notice here. I think it might be the next exhibit. If we may. No.
Nope.
There's a notice exhibit.
Nope.
Okay, I saw it. No.
Nope.
No. Let's go back. Maybe it's a prior exhibit.
There it is.
There it is. Okay. You will see the dates starting with today through the end of January of 2021. They were renoticed as being virtually and remote, okay, which is that above paragraph. And all of the other fancy language that's required to be in there is in there. I went over this with Michelle and Mark Siegel last week. They were aware of what had to be done and they've upgraded it. And this was in fact submitted to the newspaper. So we are in compliance with new regulations issued by Department of Community Affairs. As part of these new regulations, we're required to adopt procedures, and Christopher was reading about comments, public comments and the like. Well, there's a next exhibit, which up top says City of Asbury Park Zoning Board of Adjustment, resolution establishing standard procedures. And they're basically what we already have. There's a couple of new twists about public comments that and testimony that are in the notice or in the procedures. However, I think I'm certainly going to challenge a couple of the requirements that they put in because they violate the New Jersey land use law, specifically section 10, I think it's D, it might be 10D, requiring all testimony of all witnesses before municipal agencies such as zoning and planning boards to be under oath. That public comment, general public comment, is not what we do. I think that was more a requirement for mayor and council because they have general sessions where the public can make comments, not under oath about anything in general regarding matters within the city or within the jurisdiction. We're not that type of agency. We are quasi judicial agencies and we operate similar to the courts. So I'm going to continue to have everyone sworn in. I'm going to continue to recommend that we allow members of the public who wish to participate in the public portion where they're interested parties giving testimony to do so, whether or not they're doing it either by telephone or by computer, as opposed to both having a computer that has audio and video components. I think that would be patently unfair to members of the public who do not have a computer and can only reach us by telephone. It's worked fine all the way down the line. And my job is to also protect not only the integrity of the board, but also protect the rights of the public, their constitutional rights to be heard. And I will do that. So we need to adopt this resolution that sets forth the procedures and requirements, which basically Christopher just read. Again, between now and the next meeting, I intend to do some more research and give you some more. I'll give you an update. And I try to reach the Department of Community Affairs, but the number that they gave, no one is answering. And I'm trying to get to someone at the state to see if I can get an understanding of what they mean about a couple of these provisions that are totally inconsistent with each other. So be that as it may, I would like the board to adopt this resolution that is before you regarding these new requirements and procedures for remote public hearings.
And I will make I will make a motion to approve the resolution which adopts the board procedures for virtual meetings pursuant to NJAC 5:39-1.
I'll second.
Notice resolution. So it's moved by Christopher Avalone and seconded by Russell Lewis. Okay, has Dan Harris arrived? No, okay. So we can allow.
Well, we still have.
We still have two alternates, okay?
Right,
So I'll call the first alternate, okay? Because that's the one, we're missing one seat is empty, basically. We have 7 regular members. 7 members can vote on things. You can't have more than 7 members voting on something. So let's start with Brittany Ashman,
Yes. Yes.
Christopher Gonzalez,
Yes.
Jill Potter,
Yes.
Tim Slick,
Yes.
Russell Lewis,
Yes.
Christopher Avalone,
Yes.
and first alternate is Bonnie Nach.
Yes.
Thank you. So that resolution carries. Next resolution, we need Mr. Avalone to recuse himself and have Mr. Lewis take over the meeting because it's to vote on the adoption of the new singular wireless resolution. And Mr. Avalone was recused from that application.
Before you proceed, Jack, I just wanted to note that the resolution for the board procedures for virtual meetings is listed or under Exhibit B3.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Next exhibit is B4, and that's the resolution for new singular wireless. Okay. The eligible members on that are Dan Harris, Brittany Ashman, Christopher Gonzalez, Tim Slick, Catherine Minervini, Bonnie Knock, and Russell Lewis.
I'll make a motion to approve and adopt the resolution for new singular wireless at 321 Sunset.
I'll second.
So Brittany is the second. Okay, Dan Harris is not here. Brittany Ashman,
Yes.
Christopher Gonzalez,
Yes.
Tim Slick. Tim? Hello, Tim. I can see him, but he's not responding.
What is going on here?
Yes, I'm having
Okay.
internet issues, just so you know.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. Russell Lewis,
Yes.
Catherine Minervini,
Yes.
Hey, Rob.
and Bonnie Knock.
Yes.
Okay, resolution adopted.
Not sure if there's anything we can do. The internet's like unstable connection, yada, yada, yada.
Tim,
Yada,
mute
yada,
yourself.
The song and a dance next.
All right.
Okay.
Next we have up is the adoption of the 2021 calendar for the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
And that would be exhibit B5.
So, has everyone on the board had a chance to review this and take a look at the dates that are listed? So, since there has been no mention of any conflicts in my understanding, I will make a motion to adopt the new calendar for the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the year 2021.
I'll second.
Okay. Members. Brittany Ashman.
Yes. And I did respond to Michelle and Irina before she left, but I will be out on that first meeting.
I understand that, Brittany, that's fine.
Christopher Gonzalez.
I do not remember which week it has, but it's 1 week that I cannot make. I have to check my calendar again.
Okay.
But it's only 1 week. I think it's February.
Okay. So you vote in favor of this calendar?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Joe Potter.
Yes.
Tim Slick. I can't get a visual.
Unmute. Yes.
Okay, we're good. Russell Lewis,
Yes.
Christopher Avalone.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bonnie Knock.
Yes.
Okay, calendar goes. We're good.
All right. So I think that brings us to the applications, but I'm not sure if we should proceed without Dan or not. What do you think, Jack?
I would say take a 5-minute recess.
Okay,
You
I'll
know,
make a motion to take a 5-minute oh, there he is.
All right, Dan, how are you?
I made it.
All right, Dan. Okay.
Apologize.
Can you call the roll again, Jack?
Yes, let's call the roll. Daniel Harris,
Yeah.
Brittany Ashman,
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, here.
Christopher Gonzalez,
Here.
Jill Potter,
Here.
Tim Slick,
Here.
Russell Lewis,
Here.
Christopher Avalone,
Here.
and just for attendance purposes, Bonnie Knock,
Here.
Catherine Minervini.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the first application on the agenda, which is 306th Avenue. Mr. Karras, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Andy Karras on behalf of the applicant,
We're back here tonight to present the planner's testimony on this application at 306 Ave. Just to refamiliarize everybody with the application, it is what is being proposed is a two-family house. It's a variance application for that of a lot size of 3,500 square feet. As I indicated, it's for a two-family house. We presented our architectural plans at previous hearings by Mike Savarese, and tonight we're going to present our planner, David Roberts, to support the application. Mr. Roberts, are you there?
I am on mute.
I am. Good evening, everyone.
How are you, David?
Good.
All right, can you please give us the, you got to swear him in first, Jack?
Wait, before, let me, I'll swear in Dave, but before we do that, there are certifications that we have to submit into the record by
Yes.
members who listen to the transcript or review the proceedings, right? Can we get them posted again by APTV?
Andy, can you bring up those two certifications?
Okay. The first one is by Christopher Gonzalez. I didn't witness it because I wasn't present. I know he did it. We're going to ask him if he did it. It worked out as a self-serving certification. There's no doubt that he did this. So, Christopher, are you available? Christopher Gonzalez.
Yes, I am.
Okay. This is your
Yes,
certification?
I am.
This is in fact your certification. You signed this?
Yes,
And what's set forth therein is true and accurate, correct?
yes.
Okay. So we'll submit his certification as Exhibit 6.
Here, you
Okay. Next one.
gonna have any internet connections or you are?
I'm sorry?
It's,
I'm sorry?
can everybody hear me?
Yes? Brittany,
Hello?
I think he's having internet problems, he
okay,
said.
okay. Brittany, I sent this to you, you filled this, you signed this, you read it, what's in there is truthful and accurate, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll submit that certification on behalf of Brittany into the record as B7. Now, from what I understand, that will make every one of the regular members eligible to hear the matter and vote. So we have a full complement of 7 regular members. Is that correct? Or is there anyone who's, no one is recused, correct?
Not from this application, Jack.
Right, the next one. Okay. So with that in mind, why don't we proceed to swear in Mr. Roberts? Dave, please raise your right hand. Thank you. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And state your name and your profession for the record. And when we're done with qualifying Dave, I'm going to swear in Donna and Doug, our staff members as well.
Okay, yes, my name is David G. Roberts. I represent the firm of G.G. Roberts Planning and Design, LLC, based in Bayville, New Jersey. And testifying tonight as a licensed professional planner. And I don't know if you need me to provide qualifications. I have been previously.
Yeah, you've
accepted.
testified before the board on a number of applications.
We accept your credentials, Mr. Roberts. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before Mr. Karras starts his direct examination, let's have Donna Miller and Doug. Please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay. Please state your individual names for the record and your affiliation with the board.
Donna Miller, board planner.
Doug Cleland, board engineer.
Okay, I think procedurally we're set to go. Mr. Karras, you can proceed.
Mr. Roberts, you're familiar with the property at 306 Ave in Asbury Park, am I correct?
That's correct.
And you prepared a planning report relative to this application, am I correct?
Yes, a PowerPoint presentation exhibit.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that report. I think we did it last time as A9.
That's what the records are in the planning department, showing A9.
Mr. Roberts, would you go through your findings and your opinion relative to your examination of this property and this project?
Sure, if I can share my screen, I will put that PowerPoint on.
Please.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see it. I'll have to scroll back to the first slide. Okay. That was a preview in reverse. Okay, as was mentioned before, what I did in terms of my evaluation of this property, which is as the board I think knows from previous meetings, is a vacant lot of 35 by 100, located at the corner of 6th Avenue and Webb Street. You can see on the zoning map in this first page 1 exhibit that it's right on the kind of the congruence of a number of different areas of the city. Not only is it on the edge of the between the R2 zone, it's really the extreme southeast corner of the R2 zone as it butts up against the R3 zone, which is the other half of the block that fronts on Sunset between 6th and Sunset. It is also at the basically the meeting place between the renovation infill area, which it is located in, as can be seen in the cross hash lines, and the renewal area to the east. It is in an area in need of rehab as opposed to an area in need of redevelopment, but it's right on the edge. So there's a number of things going on right at this particular spot. And as noted here, it's vacant, surrounded by multifamily buildings. Kingsley Terrace to the east, two three-family dwellings at 302 and 304 6th Ave, and a large multifamily building at 310 6th Avenue, 2 lots to the west. At this section, this block of 6th Avenue between Park and Webb has a number of apartment buildings on it, a couple of condominiums. I'll get into that, a little more detail on that background in the next couple of slides. This is really just a close-up of the same spot that's just showing the subject property with the legend for the zoning districts on the left-hand side. This is just a Google overhead to illustrate this neighborhood. I think everyone's sure very familiar with it. I myself actually lived in the Esplanade. I don't know where that is coming from. I don't know if that's me or you. It's me. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I myself lived in the Esplanade from 1985 to 1995, so actually was a resident of this block for 10 years. But as you pan around this property, which is where my pointer is now, you can see the number of the apartment buildings in the R3. The R3 basically runs, kind of follows the line behind the garages of the Esplanade straight across and includes the corner along Park. The R2 it starts at that same line and goes to the north for several blocks. There are apartment buildings on basically all 4 corners. And then as we move around, you can see that the 2 most proximate properties, 302, as was mentioned before, and 304, 306, they are both 3-family homes. There's also 3 structures on lot 4, I believe it's lot 4, which is sandwiched between the Esplanade's garages and maintenance residence and the subject property. And then we got skipped up here. This is just a tax map with results of kind of a walk around land use survey that I did, and I combined that with an analysis of tax records to get unit counts in some cases. But the bolded numbers are the number of units on each of these parcels. And also in this key, you can see that I tried to have the 1 family shaded in yellow, the 2 to 3 families shaded in orange, the 4 families in tan, and then the subject property here is vacant. There is 1 public property, which is the Board of Ed offices on Park. If looking at these 2 blocks in this particular block front between Park and Webb on both sides of the street, and then there is a rooming house in the middle of the block across from the subject property. And you can see what some of these unit counts are on some of these properties. The lot immediately to the south, abutting the, I guess it would be the side or rear, depending on whether you're looking at it from 6th or Webb, actually has 3 different buildings in it with a total of 4 units. There's some significant density in these areas. The single families, for the most part, on the block where the subject property is located, are focused on Park, and a couple of those are 25 by 100 foot lots. One is a 50 by 150 foot lot, and then based on a count of electric meters, mailboxes, et cetera, I estimated that the properties on the other side of 6th, that there was 1 single family. I believe the others had 2 or 3, most likely 2 units in them, which is fairly typical in these neighborhoods. It's the R2 is basically a 1 and 2 family area, but it does permit other types of uses, such as multifamily based on 2,500 square feet of lot area per unit. The main focus, and this is just some additional background, these are the 2 adjacent properties on 6th. And you can see from the walk around that they're each based on the number of mailboxes, doorbells, et cetera. At 302 6th and 302.5 6th have 3 units each. And these lots are, one is a 40 by 100 foot lot, which is slightly larger than the subject lot. The other is a 25 by 100 foot lot, the one that's obviously the narrower of the 2, which is smaller than the subject lot. So this gives you a sort of a feel for the immediate area. A couple of additional angles looking down Webb Street facing south, and also looking back up Webb Street facing north at the corner of Webb and Sunset. These are street shots that I took of some of the uses. This is the rooming house that was referenced earlier. And then the single families along Park. So it gives you an idea of what the 1 families look like, what the buildings that may have 2 or 3, and then there's a rooming house that is a non-conforming use in the area. This is essentially the background. This is the most updated zoning comparison table. The main change that was made is the proposed dwelling, 2-family dwelling, was reduced in terms of overall square footage. So that lowered the floor area ratio. Effectively, where you see the V's, which is the square footage per unit, 2,500 square foot per unit is when 2 families are permitted based on 2,500 square feet per unit. That basically means you would need a 50 by 100 for either a 1 family or a 2 family. And then it goes from that point, a 2-family house on a 50 by 100 foot lot equates to 17 dwelling units per acre. These densities and floor area ratios were added to the zoning a couple of decades ago, actually back when I was still city planner. And that they were really meant to try to prevent overdevelopment of lots. So their main purpose is to try to keep the building in proportion to the size of the lot. In this particular case, the FAR, which is based on half the size of the lot. So basically for a 5,000 square foot conforming lot, that would allow a house of up to 2,500 square feet, which at the time we thought was reasonable. This particular 2-family dwelling is 2,266 square feet. So it's 0.64 FAR. So there's relief needed for that as well. It's all being driven by the 35 by 100 foot lot. The setbacks are really more to the balconies. You'll notice on the left that the main footprint of the house is shaded in orange, and the dotted lines are showing where the balconies are proposed. Those would be on the second floor and above, because I'm sure, as the board is aware by now, because of the base flood elevation and the FEMA regulations, and because this property is technically in a flood zone, there is no habitable space allowed on the at the ground level. The only permitted uses that FEMA allows are storage and parking, and that's why the first habitable floor, the first living level, is really on the second floor of the house, and that's why the balconies are shown in that fashion. In terms of trying to put this in perspective, and in terms of how this proposed footprint fits within the lot area and the context, I took a snip of the plan we just looked at and superimposed it into the Google aerial photograph, lined up the sidewalks and the curbs to get a feel for just exactly how that works out. And as you'll notice, if you trace the line across the balconies facing 6th Avenue and carry it across the block, what you find is that the balconies line up with the fronts of the dwellings immediately to the west, as well as and what happens is the porches of those existing dwellings and the balconies of the apartment complex actually protrude out in front of that line, which would be the same line that the balconies that are proposed for this property are adhering to. So even though the front setback line is measured to the front wall of the house, even that is set back further than the properties immediately down the block from the property in question. And one of the main reasons and purposes of a lot of the standards in the zoning ordinance that date back to the 80s when we did the first one was to try to get blocks to and buildings to line up along both street fronts, especially on corner lots. So this gives you a bit of a feel for the way that the efforts that were made to try to adhere to that. You'll also notice that the actual footprint of this particular two-family dwelling is actually smaller than the prevailing footprints in many of the other properties around it.
David, am I correct that with regard to the balconies, they're permitted above the first floor being that base level, as long as they don't extend more than 6 feet beyond the building line?
I believe that is in a related provision of the ordinance.
That's the definition of a porch, am I correct?
Right, and
Okay.
I think the point here is that we took the conservative approach and measured the setback to the furthest protrusion of the balconies on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I'd want to address is the height. There's height relief required. There was modifications to the architectural plans to reduce the amount of square footage on the top floor to about 200 square feet. But in many cases, and just speaking having been the planning director here in Toms River for since 2016 and dealing with the recovery from Sandy, where we lost over 4,000 substantially damaged properties, and for the most part, by this point, have replaced most of them. Only maybe a couple hundred properties remain. One of the things that was done almost immediately before I actually took over working for the township was there was an allowance made for when buildings were required to be elevated. There's no wiggle room when it comes to the flood hazard regulations with FEMA, because the flood insurance that everyone pays is based on the CR rating for each town. So all new structures that are in a flood zone have to be elevated to the base floor elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. And that effectively changed the nature of many of the neighborhoods. In this case, you have the garages and basically the passageways to the 2 units on the ground floor, and this is the Webb Street elevation. So in many cases, the height would in many towns has been changed to start at the base elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. In other words, you're not penalized in height by the fact that you're required to raise the dwelling. In my observation in this particular case is that this may be the first infill development since Sandy that I can see in this general area. There may be other places in the city where there's been development that has now since been done with the changed maps and other things that were the result of Sandy. But in this particular case, this is a single lot infill, whether it's a one-family house or a two-family house. In my opinion, the height, whether it's this architectural style or some other, would be equally impacted by that base flood elevation. So we feel that that's a consideration with regard to the overall height of the house. And I would just note, as I think was pointed out in your board planners report, in terms of the architectural style, there has been some discussion as to whether the architectural guidelines from the most recent redevelopment plan would apply to the renovation and infill area. Back in the original redevelopment plan, the infill area was basically allowed, or effectively was governed by the underlying zoning. But the current redevelopment plan supersedes that zoning, and it's my understanding that that's why the architectural guidelines from the redevelopment plan are extended into the renovation and infill area. This is really just to point out, and I had actually done this presentation before I saw the letter from your board planner, and we both kind of pointed to the same Deal Lake townhouses as another example of this kind of Art Deco modern style of architecture. And the only reason for really bringing it out tonight is just to point out that this architectural style for this proposed two-family would not be an anomaly in the city in the renovation infill area. This is just getting into the zoning. Again, we talked about the fact that the two permitted uses in the R2, and I might have mentioned multifamily before, because I was thinking of the R3, but is really just a single family house on a 5,000 square foot lot, and a two-family, three-family, or four-family. So it's really 2 to 4 family on lots of not less than 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit, and that's the reason for the relief, which really gets to the point where that it really comes down to a choice, in my opinion, as to whether a single family or a two-family is most appropriate for this lot. And I think that given its unique location, as opposed to, say, for example, being in the middle of a block from, say, 6th Avenue North, it is right on the cusp, and it effectively faces the renewal area. So where there's anticipated high density residential development with the same architectural styles that have been referenced in the redevelopment plan, including the one that was chosen for this particular house. In my opinion, based on the 35 by 100 foot lot and the nature of the surrounding uses being a considerably higher density than what's being proposed, that the two-family is appropriate, that it provides for a kind of a compromise between a single family, which is relatively rare within this block compared to some of the other uses that were referenced, as opposed to other parts of the R2 zone, and the fact that really if it was restricted to a one family, which would also require the bulk variances as well, and have the same issues with regard to height and setbacks as the two family, would effectively be isolated without any other one families immediately around it. And in my opinion, that would not be as appropriate as a two-family compromise. It's certainly consistent with the proposed master plan, as we'll get into, and I believe it advances the three purposes of zoning for this particular lot in terms of its uniqueness, where it's located, and the fact that it's undersized and can't be enlarged, that it would allow for the appropriate use of the property. I think a two-family is appropriate for this location, and it's consistent with the permitted uses. It provides sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses. A two-family is certainly a prevalent use in the R2 zones, and to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques. One of the things I was trying to remember on in prepping for this is when I lived in that neighborhood for the 10 years between 85 and 95, I believe that lot was vacant then. So I believe if it hasn't been vacant that long, that it's certainly been vacant for an extraordinarily long time. And this infill development, I believe, will effectively round out the block, eliminate some of the things I noticed on the lot, such as parking of vehicles on the property, other things that are undesirable visually, and this would create a building that will effectively front on Webb Street because the long side of the lot, and provide an interface with whatever is developed on the other side in the redevelopment area. And then in my case, in my view, in terms of some of the bulk standards, they're all driven under C1 hardship by the fact that the subject site's 15-foot narrower than a conforming lot. And effectively the corner location requires 2 front yards, even though there are some allowances for a reduction. The 35-foot versus the 50-foot width still makes that a very constraining standard. It basically leaves a 9-foot building envelope as referenced in the top bullet.
David, if we take into account the ordinance requirements or provisions with regard to how they define a porch inclusive of a balcony, that obviates then the need for variance relief for the front yard setback because it's 25 feet to the building. Am I correct on?
Yes, it's only the balconies that would encroach into the front yard. And as I mentioned before, they actually line up with the fronts of the houses that are the dwellings that are to the west of them. So I would say if there's an allowance for balconies to allow them to go into 6 feet into the front yard, it actually kind of reminds me of the allowance we used to have for front porches for the same purpose. It's basically it covers the same purpose. Then certainly the setback as it relates to the balconies, at least on 6th Avenue, certainly would not apply to these balconies. They're the only things that protrude into the front yard.
And similarly, with regard to the rear yard, the setback to the building is 25 feet. To the balcony, I believe it's 21 feet. Again, we'd be in compliance because of the definition they have for a balcony under the code. Am I correct?
That I would agree if that definition allows for that exemption, then the balcony would not require relief. I think we were trying to err on the side of being conservative. But yes, I would agree with that.
Correct. All right, please go on.
And then finally, the purposes of zoning I referenced before, and I think this slide effectively restates what I just mentioned in the past regarding the past slide, as regarding the benefits outweighing the detriments based on the purposes of zoning under the C2 standard. Again, given the substantial investment in what right now has been a vacant lot for many years, and effectively an eyesore on the corner, the very visible corner of that area, right on the border of the redevelopment area. These, as far as the master plan, in the review, a couple of the recommendations I noted was that there was a portion of the R2 zone. These were recommendations regarding the R2 zone itself, where there were some recommendations to change the zoning to R1, which would only allow single families. But those blocks were closer to Main Street, and they were predominantly one family, in contrast to the neighborhood we're looking at this evening. There was no specific change recommended for the R2 zone in terms of zoning designation with regard to the R2 zoning along both sides of 6th Avenue between Park and Webb in the 17 master plan. And then also there was a regulatory recommendation for the R2 zone, which effectively was looking to try to eliminate the 3 and 4 family uses option and effectively just allow the 1 family, 2 family option, which is why I was misrecollecting a little earlier. So right now the R2 allows basically the 1 through 4 based on the size of the lot. The 1 and 2 can go on a 50 by 100. The recommendation was to just eliminate the other option of the 2, 3, and 4. I'm sorry, the 3 and 4 unit dwellings based on additional lot area. and just leave it as a 1 and 2 family residential zone. That has not, to my knowledge, been put into effect yet, but the fact that the proposal is for a 2-family house is consistent with that recommendation, or I should say a 2-family use. And then I think we've kind of gone over, and it's one of the reasons why I went into some length to try to explain the nature of the surrounding area, that in terms of having adverse impact on the surrounding area, it's clear that the other properties around the subject property are at a higher density and have issues with enough parking and other things, especially the 2 dwellings to the west, immediately to the west at 302 and 302.5 Sixth, and that introducing a 2-family house on this property would certainly not adversely impact them. And then in terms of the adverse impact on the master plan and land development ordinance, again, if we were looking at anything else, anything other than a 1 or 2 family home, I would say that you could not make this statement, but I believe that being the fact that the 2-family use is being proposed, and I think designed specifically for this lot in terms of being on a corner, that it's certainly not going to impair the intent of the master plan. And as you can see, there are additional other properties with higher density, 3 or more units on smaller lots in the immediate area. So this would certainly not be inconsistent with with the area around it and or the master plan, in my opinion. And these conclusions basically just restate some of the other things I mentioned. It's a permitted use. The main issue is a choice between relegating the site to a single family and no other use, or allowing for the 2-family use given the uniqueness of the property and where it's situated and its constraints in terms of its size, which would apply equally to whether it's a 1-family house or a 2-family house. The size of the lots are immediately around in the same block. The fact that it's on the corner surrounded, adjacent to an R3 zone on one side, the renewal area on to the east, and multifamily development to the west and to the north, that we think that, or I believe that you could grant this variance and that it would be consistent with the objectives of the master plan to emphasize 1 and 2 family uses in the zone and to eliminate 3 and 4 family uses. And that concludes my testimony, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I have no questions for you. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Roberts?
I do. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead, Chris. Was that Chris?
By any chance, you guys have a rendering how the building? Yes. Hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The rendering of the building, how is all the properties right next to it and across the street?
I don't have a rendering. The specific rendering I think you're asking about would be a 3D. I think that would show this dwelling in proportion in 3 dimensions to the others. I do not have that in my presentation. Probably the closest thing I have is the aerial photograph, and this is a 2-dimensional, not 3-dimensional, but it gives you the footprint compared to the neighboring properties. There may be other exhibits that show what you're asking for, but this is all I have in my exhibit this evening.
I'm trying to, there was an exhibit of, I'm trying to find what number it was for the rendering.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you.
A6,
Is it 86? Okay,
A6 revised rendering.
that would be it.
So I had a question. I think, Chris, you're done. I think, okay. So if you go, I think it was slide 15, you showed essentially the hardship, and you wouldn't be able to build something without needing a variance, a side yard variance. Can you go to that slide?
Like 15?
I think it was 15.
Yeah, so these were the, okay.
So you mentioned you couldn't build it without a setback relief. However, and I understand the height, what you're saying about the BFE plus 1 foot of freeboard. Why couldn't you build something though? Because there are, I'm looking at the planner's report, you essentially need a variance for building coverage, FAR, and density, which doesn't really have to do with setbacks. So have you laid this out on with the setbacks, and have you tried to, like, what constraints are there besides the setbacks is what I'm asking.
I think again, the lot coverage and the almost effectively all of the required relief is driven by the fact that it's a 35 by 100 foot lot instead of a 50 by 100 foot lot. If this was a 50 by 100 foot lot in this same location, you would have the additional lot width that you would need to be able to get a building envelope to work without without that kind of relief. Effectively, what the applicant did was they came up with a building footprint that worked in terms of the functional layout of the dwelling, but as I note here, it's really the combination of the setbacks from both streets that squeeze a 35-foot wide lot into the point where you end up with a 9-foot building envelope by my calculation. So again, the building coverage, as I mentioned before, building coverage, FAR, all of that is driven by the fact that if this was a 50 by 100 foot lot, this same footprint would not need that required relief. But
Dave, can you go to page 10 of your planner's report? I think that reflects that where the building is. Yeah.
Right.
On the site.
Right. And again, the setbacks are required from both 6th Avenue and Webb Street. It's probably the setback from Webb Street is that's the most constricting, and even with the allowance on non-conforming lots of relief from that setback, it still pushes that footprint into pretty much where it is, and that footprint still, because of the size of the lot, requires a lot coverage requires lot coverage relief. We only allow, back when we came up with these standards, we were assuming a 50 by 100 foot lot, that 50% would be, that 25% would be its footprint, 50% would be its coverage. That includes driveways, parking, et cetera. And that's even though this building, I believe, is consistent with the building coverage, it's the size of the lot creates issues when you try to get the driveways, the sidewalks, everything else in with the building coverage. And that's why we need some relief based on the size.
David, when we look at the page here, page 10, it reflects on there where the cars are situated within the building. Am I correct on the first floor?
Yes, on sheet 10 of this of the presentation, the parking it's probably hard to see at this scale, but it's inside the garage. I think probably we go to the 9 is a little easy to see. The driveways come in with the parking underneath the building on both sides for both units. The rest of that ground floor is really getting you up into each of the two sides where the living levels are.
And if you were to narrow that property, you would not be able to get cars into that garage. Am I correct?
Yes, that is true. That in order to get the garage, in order to get the car to fit, that this is somewhat dictating the width of the footprint.
Okay.
Right, but the number of cars is due to the amount of occupants that are in the building. So if you lower the amount of people living there, that would be less amount of cars, correct?
Well, it's not the amount of people living there. It's the number of units and the number of bedrooms.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if this was for like a single family or less dense, you wouldn't need to provide for all those parking spaces.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think that on the other hand, then you're still, I would have concern about a standalone single family in this location, considering what's surrounding it. I totally understand the difference between parking for a one family and parking for a two family. It's a difference of two vehicles in most cases, but in this particular case, the parking I would not be as concerned about here because I believe in terms of this property, it's actually providing more parking than some of the other properties around it, especially the oldest dwellings. And Webb Street is at least in most of the time during the year is not as heavily parked as some of the other streets like 6th Avenue, for example. I understand that in the summer.
Am I correct that the property is 20 feet wide? Am I right?
I believe the house may be 20 feet wide.
Exactly, I'm sorry. The house is 20 feet wide, correct?
Right, and then typical parking space is 18.
And in terms of a residence, planning-wise, you see many residences that are narrower than 20 feet, either a single family or a two family.
Yes, and right in the immediate neighborhood, there are lots that are only 25 feet wide.
25 feet, but anything less than 20 feet.
Anything, I think the property next door, immediately to the west, there are several dwellings on that lot, and I did not measure them, but I would say just based on visual observation that a couple of those look like they could be less than 20 feet. Yes, because
but mostly what you see planning-wise, do you see many new buildings or many new residences, either one or two family, being built less than 20 feet in width?
No. Not standalone. In fact, and we actually have a standard in our ordinance in Toms River that prohibits that.
Thank you.
Okay, my second question is to the detriment of the negative criteria. Do you not, yes. So do you not see any adverse impact to the neighborhood based on the fact that there's not a front door on the front facing, the address is 6th Ave and there's no door?
Well, I think that's a function of the way that the house had to be oriented in order for it to function properly. But
as a multi or two family.
As a two family, but I think the other challenge to that is even if there was an entrance on 6th Avenue, it would have to be at the second floor level, which means you would have to, we see a lot of that down at this part of the Jersey Shore where there's multiple stairways to get to it because you have to navigate the change in elevation from ground level to that front door, which is really on the second floor. So even though you might have, even if you were able to get a door on the 6th Avenue side, it would still not look like the 100-year-old houses that are traditionally found on some of those, the older neighborhoods where they have the front porch to get you to the front door. In this case, the front porch wouldn't be high enough to get you to the front door. So it's still going to look, effectively, it's going to look more, the side facing 6th Avenue is going to be more consistent with some of the apartment buildings in the area where they have balconies on the second floor and above than it would look as a traditional wood frame house with a front porch. It's just with the flood elevation restrictions, it's difficult to be able to get that to work. I think in this particular case, the way the house is designed solves the problem of the flood zone. It's just, it certainly would be, I think, more attractive to have a front door on 6th Avenue, but I think there's a lot of constraints that they're trying to work with.
Well, right, but you have a door right now on Webb, right? Webb. Why couldn't you do that? Create a door. I mean, that looks pretty normal, but it's just on the wrong side, in my opinion. Why couldn't you swing that door? Have the door facing 6th and have a porch there. That doesn't, and Donna, maybe this is a question for Donna because she's a CFM, but are there any restrictions of building a porch? And do you have to have the porch on the second floor about the BFE?
So this is Donna Miller. Hi, everybody. And I am a certified floodplain manager, so I will give a little testimony outside of my normal area of expertise. But yes, the floodplain regs permit you to have entrances. The entire property is subjected to the flood designation, not one side or the other. So where the garage doors are just as much in the floodplain as a front door on the 6th Avenue facade. What can't occur within the floodplain elevation, which they've given us that survey, updated survey that shows an elevation over 10 feet. And the flood elevation is 10, so they would need to be a foot above that. It's not like, you know, an insurmountable height of, you know, a 20-foot flood elevation. Some areas of Tom's River where the flood elevation is substantially higher than the actual ground elevation, you need to have those exterior stairs, and you can't have any, you know, use of the building basically at ground level. Mr. Roberts is correct. But in this case, we're very close to the actual flood elevation, which could be achieved by a number of engineering means, building means, that would not obstruct the use of an entrance along the 6th Avenue frontage. And that brings me to another point. Mr. Karras had asked about whether the balconies constitute encroachments into the setbacks and whether they meet the definition of a porch. And so I'll refer to the land development regulations, which do permit a fair amount of you know, encroachment into the front yard setback. We know that. We encourage open porches in the front yards, but the definition of the porch is an entrance, a roofed entrance. So if it's on the 2nd floor, it's not the entrance to the building. So it's disqualified immediately by not being the entrance. And then there's a caveat to balconies are permitted above 1st floors on buildings that are used as hotels, high rises, multifamily dwellings, but not single or 2-family dwellings. And those are allowed to be 6 feet beyond the building line. So there's kind of a couple of things going on in this definition, but the most basic threshold is that it be a covered entrance to the dwelling, and balconies do not meet that criteria. So they are encroachments into the setback.
Well, wait a minute. You say it says multifamily. It doesn't exclude 2-family. That's number one. And number two, when you look at the definition of yard,
The ordinance, Andy, is more than 2 units.
all right, I'll take a look at. But also, when you look at the definition of yard, it says the exterior open area between the wall of the building or structure and the lot line. When it says rear yard, it says the open area between the nearest wall of the principal building or structure and the rear lot line. So they're talking about the wall of the structure, not the balcony wall, when they define your rear yard and also your yard.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the definition of yards, or are you talking
When you
about?
look at the definition, irrespective of balcony, I'll have to look to see, I read it multi-family dwelling, I understood it to include a 2-family because it's more than one. If I'm wrong, I'll take a look at it, but that's my understanding how it's defined. But in addition to that, the definition of yard and rear yard is to the wall of a building or structure.
Right, but we also have further regulations in the general regulations that talk about permitted encroachments into yards. So shoot, sorry, just jumped to the wrong section of the ordinance.
No, because I know a porch, you measure it to the wall of the building, a porch does not encroach into a yard.
So it's permitted to encroach in the yard, not that it's not encroaching, it's permitted to encroach. But the definition literally starts, shall mean a covered entrance.
All right, but I'll take a look at that, because the way when it talks about port, it talks about open balconies also separate and apart from that. And I'll relook at that definition.
It's just that I've been living in it for the last couple of weeks because we're doing the amendments, and so we have changes to this definition.
Listen, I'm fine. If I'm wrong, but I'll take another look at it. But like I say, in addition to that, the way you look at a yard and a rear yard, it goes to the building wall.
And neither one of us are right or wrong. It's up to the board to decide what applies. So, but going back to,
Can I just interrupt 1 second, Donna? It's my understanding that a two-family is not considered a multifamily. Is that correct?
under the state regs and our ordinance, multifamily is 3 units or more.
Okay.
So the point about putting an entrance on the 6th Avenue facade, there's nothing about the floodplain, flood damage regulations or FEMA's regs that would prohibit an entrance on the 6th Avenue frontage. And I think there's even, when you look at the Deal Court building as an example, they have, it is above the average ground elevation, but they have an element which mimics your balconies on this building that works like a front porch on those Deal Court apartments. And I think a similar attribute on the front of this building on the 6th Avenue facade would really go a long way to giving the board that comfort level on, you know, giving an entrance and a you know, proper aesthetic on 6th Avenue. I'd try to share my screen, but I don't know if we want to go there yet.
I can unshare mine. I didn't know whether we were done with it.
But perhaps the board has more questions about setbacks, et cetera.
I had another question, but it's not related to the 6th Ave frontage. So I don't, Don, if you want to share your screen, you can.
Well, let's first finish with the board members.
Okay.
Brittany, are you complete with your questions?
No, another one.
All right, go ahead.
So another negative impact that I see from this site, given the increase and, you know, significant amount of building coverage, and I know Jason mentioned this in his report, where's all the stormwater going to go?
Well, I believe, I was not at the hearing where I believe the engineer testified, so I would have to defer that to the site engineer.
Okay.
That's not really part of his testimony, Brittany.
True. I'm sorry. It's just that I see that as a negative impact on public welfare, but I guess I'll save my questions for him. Andy, is he coming back?
No, he completed his testimony.
That was the first meeting then, right?
We've had a number
Yes.
of meetings so far. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Perhaps
okay.
Doug, excuse me, Brittany, perhaps Doug has an answer for you based on the current plan. If there's a negative impact for stormwater, or have they addressed it?
I mean, in their report, they said they haven't addressed any stormwater issues.
What's the date on the report?
Oh, it's 1/23/20.
Yeah. Doug,
Yeah,
did you jump in here? Or- I don't know
my
if you-
knowledge, I don't believe there has been any engineering testimony. But that's, so yeah, it's the stormwater management, our comment hasn't been addressed. I understand that it's a proposed two-family residence. It's exempt from site plan review, but they are proposing non-conforming building coverage for the home. So we did make a comment about it, but to my knowledge, I don't believe grading and drainage has been addressed.
Well, it is not a site plan, it's only a variance application. But the stormwater, I'm trying to recall whether or not we had, what testimony we had presented early on in this application. It's been going on for quite a while. But we would have to comply with any requirements anyway, that we don't have any net increase on site of any stormwater.
However, the maximum building coverage is 25 is allowed and you're at 35.
Okay.
So that's.
Yeah, but we still have to comply where we can't have any net increase, irrespective of what it is.
Right, but you are in a flood zone and you are making the site less impervious, which.
Well, any development you do on the site, you're going to make it less impervious unless you keep it as a vacant lot.
No, not if you stay within the regulations of 25%.
But you're still going to be
Allowed.
making part of the property impervious. We're asking for 10% more, whatever the percentage is, we're
Right, which
requesting the
means
application.
more stormwater.
But we're
runoff.
still not gonna have any net increase.
How can we tell that by not having
Because it-
testimony?
Because you're not, that's part of your development. You're not doing any net increase. You're not allowed to.
You'll have to take that as part of their overall consideration, Brittany. So right now, their testimony is, they haven't really provided much testimony on stormwater management because this is not a site plan. This is just a variance approval.
Right, but we are granting them relief
Right.
from the coverage. So I think I'm valid in asking this.
Agreed. So you'll have to take it in consideration when we come to the part whether we approve or reject the application.
Okay.
Please proceed, Mr. Karras. Does anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Roberts? Anyone on the board? Okay. Board professionals, do you have any questions for Mr. Roberts?
None for Mr. Roberts from me.
Donna?
Sorry. No, I'm fine with his testimony now.
Okay. So we'll have to now move towards the public. Andy, are you there?
I'm here.
No, wrong Andy. Andy,
APTV is here.
APTV, Andy. Do we have anyone in the public that would like to ask Mr. Roberts questions regarding his testimony?
Yes, yeah, we have 3 hands up as of now. We're going to start. Looks like a phone call. Phone number ends in 350. You are now unmuted. 350.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Ernest McNolly, 400 Deal Lake Drive, apartment 5D, and I'm temporarily at 305 7th Avenue, number 25, right around the corner from this application. So can I ask my question?
Please proceed.
Okay. So the main variance that this application is, you're trying to put a 35-foot wide building, which is 10 feet over the 25-foot footprint, correct? And mainly we're talking about the
Wait, let him answer.
lot.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Ernest. Let him answer your first part of your question, and then your second question we'll ask after that.
Just the lot itself is 35 feet wide. I believe as we talked about before, that the house, in order to be able to fit the parking and just to be functional, is approximately 20. It's between 20 and 20 feet wide, 20 and 25 feet wide. So that it would be, I guess the answer to your question would be yes, that is true.
Are you going to include the word approximately? In other words, you're saying the house is approximately 20 to 25 foot wide. At this point, you don't know exactly how wide it is.
I'm sorry. I don't have the plot, the architectural plan with the dimensions where I can read it, but I know it's at least 20 feet wide based on the exhibits that I presented, because the parking is 18 feet and it fits with a couple of feet on either side to spare within the footprint.
Plans reflect that it's 20 feet wide.
That's excluding the balcony.
Well, the answer is what? That it's 20 foot wide?
It's more than 20. The house itself is more than 20 feet wide.
Okay, but at this point, you can't tell me how much more than 20 feet.
I don't have the, right now I can't.
Okay,
I
that's an answer. Okay, thank you. Okay. And on the balconies, now this is a two-family building, and I think it's all one building, right? It's not like two closely connected buildings, is it?
It's a two-family dwelling, so it has 2 units in the same building.
2 units in the same building, and they're side by side. Were they like townhome kind of things?
It would be similar to a townhome that it doesn't appear as a townhome when you face it, especially if you're looking at it from Webb Street, which is the wider frontage. It basically is a center hallway with a unit on each side of it. So they're side by side. They're not top over bottom.
Okay. I think it's your testimony that putting the entrances on Webb Street is nothing unusual, and it won't make 6th Street look strange, except that 6th Street, if you're on that block, almost every house is either a 1 or a 2 family. I guess there's a couple of multi, but everything seems to have an entrance on the front and maybe a porch and an entrance. So what you're proposing is no entrances on 6th with balconies that encroach on the setback, I guess from the 2nd level. Is that correct?
On the 2nd level, correct. That's correct. And as I testified, the location of this property where the wider side fronts on Webb Street, which is directly opposite the renewal area, that provides a street frontage along Webb Street that is more functional in terms of how it aligns. It faces the future development that's going to be on the other side of the street. There, I would agree that it does leave, because of the narrowness of the lot, it does leave a less desirable frontage on 6th Avenue. But to compare it to the other properties on 6th Avenue, some of which are over 100 years old, and some of which are not even the same type of building, they're apartment buildings, I think I would not agree that would be appropriate in for this particular lot.
Okay, which that determination will be up to the board, correct? In other words, if you want to have no front entrances on 6th, and regardless of what questions I ask you, ultimately the board will decide if you can put them on 6th. I think that's what we're talking about here. So the balconies will be encroaching on the 6th Avenue side from the 2nd floor, and I guess there's what, 1 balcony for each unit?
I think there's more than 1 balcony per unit, because the units have wrap around each side. So there's
No, I meant on 6th. On 6th.
Oh, on 6th, no, there's only 1 unit that would have a portion of it facing 6th.
Okay, so the setback normally is it? Are we going with the 25-foot setback, or that's been varianced away previously, or are we still at 25-foot setback with the exception of an open porch, which can encroach? I think that's how I think it read. But what you're saying is you're not going to have a ground level front entrance on 6th. There'll be no covered porch. So what you're saying is what will encroach are the balconies on the 2nd level, which is kind of a unique way to get an encroachment without having an entrance. But I think that's your testimony, correct?
Yeah, I think there's a little convolution there, but effectively the testimony was that you're right. There's no.
Connor, you're on mute.
Yeah, the balconies. There was discussion already between the applicant's attorney and the board's planner on the interpretation of the definitions. The city's position is that the balconies require relief. My testimony was that the balconies line up with the fronts of the buildings along the block front on the west side of 6th Avenue, and that the porches extend farther into the front yard than the proposed balconies or the balconies of any of the other buildings on the block, most of which are multifamily, also extend out beyond the 25-foot front setback. In my view, that will not be inconsistent with the pattern in the area.
Mm-hmm. Well, didn't you testify that that you based that on the fact that you determined that this was a multifamily?
I did not make a determination that it was a multifamily. I've been referencing it as a 2-family.
So I thought you testified. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
I thought you testified. Okay, I'm sorry.
That was discussion that I had.
Right.
No, I know, but it's for everybody. In other words, the way it was presented is the reason we can get these encroachments or that justifies the variance is because this is a multifamily.
Is this a question or are you testifying then?
No, it's a question.
What's the question?
Did you testify that it was a multifamily?
No, I did not. You
Okay.
might be
I-
recollecting the exchange between the board, between the applicant's attorney and the board planner.
That's
It's not-
right, but we're talking with you. In other words, you're saying the configuration of the balconies and the 6th Avenue, no entrance, no porch, is based on the fact that you say, according to a multifamily, when it was, weren't you told by the planner of the city that it's not a multifamily, it's a 2-family? So
Yes.
I don't understand how you can ask for the variance when you're saying it's a multifamily. And aren't they telling you it's not a
Excuse me.
multifamily, it's a
He answered the
2-family?
question and he said he did not say it was a multifamily dwelling. He said it was a 2-family. He said that. That's his testimony.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I think my ears still work, but I heard that it was corrected by the city planner.
No.
Can I ask the city?
Andy and the city and the board planner had a discussion, not David.
I was incorrect.
Oh, is this Mr. Karras?
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, but I'm not allowed to ask Mr. Karras a question then.
No, he's not a witness. No.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So now we're back to the fact that we're dealing with 2-family, not a multi, so that you're seeking variances for a lot of reasons, for footage. Is that correct? For the footprint of the building? What is the footprint of the building? It's on a 35 by 100 lot. What is the width of the building?
The plans are on file.
No. Well, I'm not there. I'm virtual. I can't see anything.
But I think he
I'm
answered
just
the
asking
question. You asked that question previously, and I think he gave you his answer.
Yeah, he said it was approximately 20, but it could be 25.
Yeah, but that's his answer. You can't.
Okay. Okay. If that's what. Okay. Good. So we're going to keep the word approximate. And the length of the building, the depth. No, wait. What would this be? Since the front is on web, the way you're proposing it, what is the width of the building? I think that's how it works. If you're proposing the entrances on web, then when you're standing in front of the building, the width would be the length, the 100-foot length of the lot.
You're testifying.
And well, no, it is with the entrances the way you're proposing it on web. Doesn't that make the facing the building? Doesn't that make the width of the building, which would have been the depth of the building if it was on 6?
This is a corner lot, so when you're depending on whether you're facing it from 6th or web,
I know that.
The lot width.
I'm saying when you're facing it on web, if it's accepted the way they're presenting it, you'll be standing on web, looking at a building that's going to be how wide?
I'll help you out. The plans reflect 50 feet.
Now, isn't it correct that now that you determined that the side of the building, which is going to be on the front on 6, is now going to be the depth of the building, not the width? So you're changing it by asking for a variance to put the 2 entrances on web instead of 6. So now that changes what the width and the depth of the building are. It just flips around. In other words, so when you're standing to go in the way you approve it,
I'm going to object. Is he asking a question, or is this just testimony to argue for no purpose?
Okay. If you're approved and I'm standing on web, getting ready to go into one of the units, isn't it correct that the width of the building, from my left side to my right side, is going to be what? It's not going to be the 20 or 25. That's going to be the depth.
I tried to help you out. I told you, when you look at the plans, it reflects 50 feet. The building is 50 feet by around 20 feet, 20 to 25.
Oh, okay. So it's 50 feet by around 20 to 25. All right. At some point, is that around going to be clarified?
Depends if you look at the plans. They're on file with the city. You have every right to go online and look at them.
Okay, but at some point, are you going to clarify around?
I already presented that testimony.
Okay, so all right, let's move on. Now, the parking you say is underneath this. I'm sorry, I had one question. How many bedrooms are proposed in each unit?
I believe that would have been a question for the architect. I did not.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought they talked about the square foot of each unit. Can you give me at least what is the square foot of each unit?
Mr. Manoli, that has not been part of Mr. Roberts' testimony. Please ask a
Okay.
question
Okay, Mr.
relevant to
A.
his testimony.
Okay, I withdraw the question, Mr. A. I don't need to be lectured. I withdraw the question. Now, about impermeability. So now you're going to put a 50 by 25 or 20 on a lot that's 35 by 100, which is now, isn't it correct now? It's completely permeable.
It's a vacant lot.
It's a vacant lot, so it's completely permeable. It's grass. I'm looking at a picture of it, and in fact, you're going to cover up with the building alone. You're going to cover up 20 by 50. You're going to cover up 2,000 square feet with the building alone, and then you need driveways and sidewalks. Correct?
You're testifying,
So-
Mr. Manoli.
Okay. What percentage of not impermeable, including everything, the building, the driveways, the sidewalks,
Not
are you
part of his
proposing?
testimony. Not part of Mr. Roberts' testimony.
Okay. You did testify that there's no water runoff yet.
Not part of his testimony.
Okay. You really shouldn't be interrupting me. I'm just trying to clarify that he said
Mute
it's going to be
him,
by,
Andy.
by
Please
another.
mute
Exactly
him.
what he's supposed to
Mute
do.
him.
He's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. He's not interrupting you. You're not asking the appropriate questions of the witness. So the chairman has every right to make you do so.
All right, unmute him again, Andy. Mr. Manoli, do you have a question for Mr. Roberts' testimony?
Okay. So the balcony's going to be enclosed.
Not part of his testimony.
Okay.
Those are architectural questions.
Okay. So did you, if the building were to be smaller, if you considered it making it smaller, is there any
That's
way?
not part of his testimony.
Well, it is, because it talks about where the front doors go. He testified that the reason you're going to see the side of the building on 6 is because it doesn't seem to work the way they want to build it. So they want to put the front doors on Webb. So all I'm asking is, was there any consideration of making the building a little smaller so that it could be like everything else on 6
Jack,
and the front entrance?
this is not part of the
Yeah,
planner's
you-
testimony.
That
Okay.
question was for the architect or some prior witness, not the planner.
Okay, so when is the, in other words, we're not going to hear the architect anymore. He's finished?
Yes.
We already went through him.
Okay. And who else did we go through? The site person? The site
Andy.
engineer?
Mr. Karas.
There is no engineer. It's only a variance application. It's not a site plan application. It's a two-family.
Oh, okay. So now we know it's a two-family. Good. Okay. It's a two-family. So, okay. So are you saying it's exempt from a site plan because it's a two-family?
It is
That's
exempt from
correct.
site plan because
All
it's
right.
a
I'm just
two-family.
asking, Mr. Karras, I'm just asking you. You could just say yes. It's exempt. Was it your testimony that the parking is underneath?
Yes.
For how many cars?
There's 2 cars for each unit. They're parked in a garage underneath each of the 2 units. So there's 2 driveways fronting Webb. They're wide enough each for 2 cars to get into the garage. So the requirement is 2 per unit, and there's 2 provided per unit.
Okay. Are they tandem or side by side in each unit?
Side by side, is shown in the plans that are on file.
Okay. Okay. All right. And so they're under the building, and are they going to enter on the website?
Yes.
There's no drive. Oh, no, it's an empty lot now. So we're talking curb cuts, correct?
I would assume so.
Okay. So the driveway has to be how wide?
Not part of his testimony, Mr. Manoli.
Okay. All right. You do need to have 2 curb cuts.
Not part of his
You're
testimony.
testifying. You're telling him what he needs. You're not asking him. Furthermore,
Well, I was going to say,
he
I
can't
was going to
answer
finish
that
it with,
question.
don't you? Okay. Okay.
He can't
Do you
answer
need
that question.
He can't. He can't.
No, he's not the
All right.
architect.
If you tell me there's underground parking and 2 garages, but he can't tell me how the cars are going to get onto the property.
No, he testified as a
Okay.
planner.
Okay.
You're
I
asking
withdraw
him
the
design
question.
questions.
I withdraw the
Let
question.
me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish.
Let him bring him in with a helicopter. I
You're
withdraw the
asking
question.
him design questions instead of questions directly related to his testimony. You're going beyond the scope of his testimony. You're asking him design questions for the site and drainage questions for the site. He's a planner. He doesn't do that.
Okay. So now there'll be 2 cars and let's see, now I guess. So now I can't. All right, so I'm just trying to figure. I can't ask about the curb cuts. I can't ask about the width of the driveways. I can't ask.
You're testifying, Mr. Manoli.
No, I'm clarifying because,
Well, don't clarify.
no matter what question.
Ask your questions.
Ask a question.
Think to yourself what you can and cannot ask, and ask your questions.
Okay. All right, I'll mute myself.
No, you don't have to do that. Just answer.
Well, I was thinking out loud. It helps me.
Don't think out loud. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to answer, ask him questions based on his testimony, and that's it.
Okay. I'm not allowed to ask, how many bedrooms are each unit?
We already
Not his
told
test-
you
not-
can't answer to ask that guy that question.
I can.
No.
I think I missed the first. Okay, I'm not able to ask that. Is it correct that the Webb Street side will have 2 garages and 2 front doors?
That's an architectural question again, Mr. Manoli.
Okay. All right, it's a pretty secretive project. I feel like I'm
Now
talking about
Now
it.
you're giving testimony.
Okay. Is this a secretive project?
I just want the record to be clear that
Improper question.
the application
We're not
has
gonna
been
answer
presented
it.
with all
Don't ask-
information describing the project. There's nothing secretive about this project. The plans are on file. Everything's been submitted.
You have
that,
to
Mr.
ask
Mr.
questions.
Karras? Mr.
based
Karras,
on-
can I ask you a question?
No.
Are you aware
You
that?
have to listen to me or I'm going to mute you. You
Well,
have
who
to ask. You have to ask questions. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. You have
But I
to.
don't know who I'm talking to. You guys don't identify yourself.
You know who I am. You know exactly
Oh,
who
I do?
am.
Let me see your American Express card.
Never mind. Mute him. He's out of order. It's getting out of hand, and we've got to move on.
Andy, please call the next public questioner.
Okay, next we have a Dana or Dana Kelly. You are unmuted. Go ahead.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Ms. Kelly is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So Dana Kelly, 301 6th Avenue, Unit 202.
Great.
Okay. My question is, the testimony stated that the first floor had to be a garage. And that was one of the justifications for the height variance.
That's correct.
Now, looking at the plans, and I did look at the plans, so isn't it true that you could raise the building by 2 feet and provide driveways in lieu of garages to not have the height variance?
I would have to say it's, I know that Donna Miller mentioned some height issues with the flood zone earlier in the hearing. I have not done an analysis. I would say that it's maybe there may be a possibility of overcoming the flood hazard regs, but I know that the choice for how the building was designed took into account the flood hazard regulations and the impact it has on the building. And I also know that Asbury Park does not have a provision in it that allows for an exemption for that difference. So I can't say for sure whether the suggestion that you're making would serve to actually allow a reasonable development on the property and provide the parking at the same time. That I would say it's certainly not as drastic as Donna pointed out as some other situations, but I can't really say that your solution would solve the problem of the height or not. I believe that the part of it has to do with the design of the house and really that extra level that triggers most of the relief.
Right.
In this case is only 200 square feet. So it's basically an attic. type of-
That brings me to my next point, but I will say that the elevation is 10.4 on the plans. And if you add the extra foot, I mean, the base elevation is 11, so you're only off by 8 inches plus the additional foot. It is possible, correct?
You could probably get the house out of the base, out of the base floor elevation, or at least the lowest habitable floor. And again, Donna's the CFM, so certainly she can address that. But I think it's really a case of then what you can do on that level that is between that and that's below the base floor elevation. Right now, the most logical alternative is just to relegate that to parking and storage, but certainly you wouldn't have to elevate the entire house by a full story in order to stay within that distance between the base floor elevation plus 1 and 35 feet, which is the height limit.
Right, that's my point. They're asking for 4 stories. The zone permits 2.5. So, I mean, if there is a reasonable way to accommodate the building and the parking, I don't think a 40% increase in the height of the building is warranted.
I appreciate what you're saying, Ms. Kelly, but that's basically a comment for the end of the application. If you have another question for the planner specifically.
Well, I do have one other question, because he just mentioned that the height variance is dictated by the 200 square foot area on the roof, which I believe in his testimony he calls a stairwell.
I do not call it stairwell. I believe it's basically a small, almost like a penthouse level, like an access to a roof deck. So there's an enclosed portion of 200 square feet that provides access to a roof deck. There probably is a stairwell in it, I would think.
Well, it says in your presentation on page 11 that it's a 200 square foot stairwell penthouse.
Right. So it includes, it's a penthouse, it's basically to get you out to the roof deck at 200 square feet, 20 by 20. There's stairwells within it, and I'm sure there's other space besides the stairwell within that 200 square foot section, but it's certainly a very small area relative to the footprint below it. Its primary purpose.
It's actually 48% larger than the bedroom.
Okay. I don't have that.
Again, that's not part of his testimony.
Okay. And I want to I know I'm not supposed to comment, but I'm not opposed to the development, but I am opposed to the height, and I think that
you can say all of that at the end of the application, Ms. Kelly.
Yeah, you'll get your opportunity. Yeah.
No, that's
you'll
fine.
get 4 minutes.
That's fine. Thank you. I'm done with this witness.
All right, Andy, please call the next person.
I'm going to call Peter Siegel to add some additional testimony.
Sorry.
No, not that Andy.
Yeah, we have one more.
Can you do Andy K or
Yeah.
help me out?
No, you're Mr. Karras.
I think that, or just call me APTV. It'll work out. There's one other person with their hand raised. It's labeled City Historian. You are asked to unmute and you are, go ahead.
Hello, testing 1, 2. Am I unmuted?
You are. Please
Yes,
state your
yes.
name and address for the record.
Hi, Warner Baumgartner, 402 Fifth Avenue, appearing as city historian. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hi, Werner. How are you?
Very well, thank you. If I could call your attention to slide number 1 in your presentation.
Okay.
Okay. You have the subject project site listed on there, and clearly defined is the local zoning. So this is a southeast corner of the R2 zone, correct?
Almost at the very corner, but there's one property between it and the very southwest corner. But yes, that is correct.
Your testimony was that the zone is split mid-block between 6th and Sunset. I think I recall you saying.
Yes, the Sunset side is zoned R3. The 6th Avenue side is zoned R2.
All right, I see that. Now the crosshatch area. What is the crosshatched area defined as?
I think I had indicated in my my direct that it's part of the renovation infill portion of that's covered under the redevelopment plan.
Okay. Well, what significance does that have for those of us who aren't so knowledgeable about this? So you have an R2 zoning and also an infill area over it.
Right. There's a redevelopment plan that was based on a designation of dating back to probably at least 1984 or earlier that defined a area needed redevelopment, which is referred to in the Asbury Park redevelopment plan as the renewal area, and then the rehabilitation area, which was referred to as a renovation infill area. They're just different names for statutorily designated areas within which a redevelopment plan can be adopted by the governing body to cover both areas, and that's the way the area has been regulated through a redevelopment plan since November of 1984.
Okay, just to simplify what you just said, there's a rehabilitation area and there's a redevelopment area, correct?
That's correct. In terms of using the statutory terms, yes.
Right, it's the statutory language is area in need of rehabilitation, which is the crosshatched area, and the gray area to the right is the redevelopment area, correct?
Those would be the statutory terms, yes.
Okay. This is considered an overlay, correct? And an overlay leaves all underlying zoning in place, correct?
My understanding is that the current redevelopment plan, and actually my recollection for the original redevelopment plan is that the choice was to supersede. There's only two options. The redevelopment plan either supersedes the zoning or it overlays the zoning. And I believe in Asbury's case, it is always superseded. However, how the redevelopment plan relates to zoning is required to be stated in the redevelopment plan. And I think there's been differences between the original redevelopment plan and the current redevelopment plan as to how that is addressed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I can't say that it's an overlay. That would probably be better directed to the board planner who would have the most recent knowledge of it. My recollection of reading the redevelopment plan where it deals with the zoning is that it supersedes.
You could be wrong, correct?
I'm always willing to be wrong. It certainly happens a lot. My wife will tell you that, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's assume for the moment that it's an overlay. Underlying zoning then takes precedence, correct?
If it's an overlay, the redevelopment plan standards will overlay on top of the zoning. And really all that means is that it's not replacing the underlying zoning because in many cases, especially in rehab areas, it's an infill type situation, which was contemplated here. So if you were to replace, say, for example, an R2 zone standard with some other standard that contemplated a much different type development, you would effectively be making everything non-conforming. So usually the purpose of the overlay is to allow what's there to continue, but if you're in compliance with the redevelopment plan, there are additional standards that you can apply to that area that also can be used. So it really depends on how the plan is written. The statute only requires an outline. The specifics, and every plan can be different, are how the redevelopment plan is written.
Okay, it's a rather complex explanation, but I think you're confirming what I'm saying, is that this overlay could in fact leave the underlying zoning in place and either make no change to it at all or impose additional criteria.
Would allow additional options depending on lot size and a lot of other things.
Exactly. So let's go to the context on page 3 of your presentation, the aerial view. Now this combined with
Can you pull that back up, Mr. Roberts, so that the board can see what is being asked?
number 3 and number 4 are essentially aerial views, Google Earth views, I would imagine. And
yes, I'm trying to get that back up.
Sure.
These two?
Okay, so there's, go to 3 there. So here's the overview that you testified to, and in the subsequent slides, you went to great lengths to describe the character of these various buildings in the neighborhood. So this is a view looking north, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How would you characterize the architectural character of this area from a historic perspective? What are the significant character defining elements?
Well, I think in this particular area, there's a number of things going on. There are a couple of, I would say the easiest way I could try to answer that question is that the dwellings that are the prototypical wood frame dwellings with front porches probably date back, I would say, 100 years or more. And generally, the higher density buildings probably range in age from, I believe the Esplanade was built in the 60s. Probably the apartment, I forget the name of it, in the center that kind of dominates the west side of 6th Avenue on the same block front as the subject property, I would estimate, from what I recall, somewhere probably sometime after that. I would say probably roughly in the same era, but probably no historic significance at all, at least in my opinion. And then again, you've got a mix of old garden apartment type dwellings, two-story brick with balconies directly across the street from the subject property, directly to the east of the subject property. So it's a mix. This particular block is definitely a mixture of different eras, different styles, different housing types, different unit counts. And I would say that makes it significantly different than some of the other more interior blocks of the R2, the same R2 zone.
So you alluded at the beginning of your description to the vintage homes on the north side of 6th Avenue there as dating back to at least 100 years or more. Those are, in fact, the historic character defining structures. The others are non-contributing. You're familiar with the historic preservation element, correct?
Yes. I'm familiar with the one that I did. I'm not necessarily familiar with if there's been any changes since then.
Yeah, that's right. I do recall you probably wrote the very first one in the mid 80s sometime. Is it true in general that when you look at the historic character of a neighborhood, you discount and essentially set aside those that are non-contributing elements, like these garden apartments and various nondescript brick buildings?
Well, if you did that in this case, you'd be eliminating, I don't know what the percentage is land area wise, but you would be eliminating the majority of the property surrounding the site. That's why I believe this site is unique.
Well, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm counting 11. Correct me if I'm wrong. If we go from the north side of 6th Avenue from the left, actually there's 2 hotel buildings there, which are vintage. So it seems to me that the entire north side of 6th Avenue, exclusive of the apartment building directly across the street from this site, are part of the vintage old housing stock of Asbury Park. Isn't that correct?
Well, I know that I believe that I remember the hotel, so I agree with you there. I think it might have been converted. I believe that the
Hotel Drake, I think you'll remember
Let
that.
him answer.
Warner, let him answer.
Warner, let him answer.
right, and then I believe the corners at Park and 6th. I believe both of those corners were. I know the one on the south side of that intersection, at the opposite end of the block from this particular vacant lot, was probably built around. It was built when I was there, so probably built in the 80s.
The north
And
side.
across the street was also a conversion. I don't recall if there was an addition to that, but I guess to answer your question and to kind of maybe try to shorten this a little bit. Yeah. On the north side of 6th, I would certainly agree. You have more of the traditional older buildings that go back to what would be considered the more notable areas of the city. On the side that this particular subject site is on, where I would say the vast majority of the buildings are not significant at all. And the buildings next door are wood frame, but they're not of the substantial variety of many of the others that are the more architecturally significant, in the other R2 sections in the zone.
All right, let's move on to slide 5, the land use. Your analysis of the land use and the density of these particular properties.
Okay, I'm there. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to scroll.
Slide 5. Yep, there we go. Okay, so once again, we're looking at 6th Avenue in the center here. You went to great pains to indicate unit counts, which is much appreciated. However, I would like to know why you did not provide any data for the 2 blocks to the east, which are effectively adjacent to this site. You did the 2 blocks
Two blocks
here, and the blocks to the east
would be in the renewal area.
And why would you discount that? There's existing housing stock there.
It's a different zone. There's an apartment building directly opposite. I just didn't think that's really. I don't believe that's relevant. We were looking at both sides of the same block front that the subject property was on, and basically the property immediately across from it on Webb Street is a parking lot for a multifamily apartment building.
What about the 2 diagonally, the northeast corner? There's 2 very handsome homes there.
I believe they have more than 1 unit in them, but I did not include it in this diagram.
Okay, so
these are condominiums, if I remember. I do remember checking the tax records for them.
Okay, so your explanation for not including any data for the northeast corner and the southeast corner of this intersection is that they're simply in the redevelopment area.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge of what sites on either of those 2 corners, the northeast side or the southeast side, are slated for acquisition and condemnation versus those which are slated for retention?
I do not at this particular time. I'd have to go back and check. I think basically the entire, my recollection is that the entire renewal area, maybe not necessarily subject to condemnation, but certainly the ability to be redeveloped by private property owners, it would be at a minimum. So what those property owners have in mind, I couldn't say at this point.
Okay. All righty. Let's move on then. Let's see. On slide number 9, let's go to slide 9. This might answer a lot of other people's questions about the setbacks and the size of the building. You have a nice measured diagram here along with the chart, right? There it is, number 9. Okay. Now, I'm also very curious about the change in the aspect of the orientation of this building on the lot. You're presenting this as 306th Avenue, yet the entrance is proposed to be on Webb Street. Now, I have never encountered that before. How does that work? If the building is legally 306th Avenue and that is designated as the front, how do you change it to an address on Webb?
Objection.
Yeah, that's way beyond the scope of his testimony. He's not a developer. He's not an architect. He can only give you planning.
He's a planner. And I
Yes,
think
you're not asking a planning question. You're asking the developer's question.
No, I don't believe I
Yes,
am.
you are. I just ruled that you are. Go to your next question or rephrase your question. Make it within the scope of his testimony.
Okay, all right, Dave, you're not gonna be able to answer that for me. So if the front is on Webb Street, what is the rear yard?
Well, this is a corner lot. I don't think it's there's anything particularly different from this corner lot than any other corner lot in the city. You have 2 front yards, and then generally, my experience in Asbury is that, well, every ordinance is different, but in my recollection in Asbury is that you take the narrower, on a corner lot, you take the narrower of the 2 frontages as the front, the back is the rear, and then you have effectively one side and then a second front, but there's allowances for reductions on the side based on non-conforming lots. So it's still, the front yard would still be facing 6th. The rear yard would be the opposite yard. The side yard would be the interior lot line with 301 6th Avenue, and then the Webb Street side would be the second front. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the hardships we have. It's a combination of 2 front yard setbacks and a 35-foot wide lot, which we can't make any wider.
From a planning perspective, how does the mail get delivered?
Objection.
I don't think that's a decision by the post office. I don't think plan has anything to do with planning.
There's an objection pending to that, Jack.
Okay.
It's sustained.
Well, it's been answered. Thank you. Okay, so on Webb Street, what's the proposed setback on Webb? I can't read this really too well. Let me blow it up. And the thing's a little.
It's in the table.
I'm going to enlarge my copy here locally and see if I can read it. The setback on Webb to the face of the building looks like 8 feet. Is that what I'm reading correctly?
I believe so. I'm looking for it in the table. I think it's 8 feet to the side of the building.
Okay. All right. 8 feet. Do you have any data as to what the setback is on the adjacent property?
On the, you're talking about 301 6th? Or are you talking about the adjacent property on Webb?
South of this site, adjacent to this to the south on Webb Street.
Well, it looks to be it would be the rear yard setback, in which in this case is at least starting with that would be
I don't mean the setback. Just forgive me. I don't mean the setback on this property. What is the front yard setback of the neighbor's property?
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe it's actually pretty much aligned with the side of the house. I tried to show that in one of the other exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
It is at least as close to Webb Street as this building, based on my analysis, if not closer. The 2 front houses next door on Webb are extremely close to the sidewalk.
Yes, they are. And I believe you testified that it's desirable to have building faces line up on both sides, correct?
As much as possible, at least so that they're consistent, so they don't look, one doesn't look out of place with another. And on a corner lot, you try to align them up so that each side of that building lines up with the buildings on both sides of the block, on both blocks, on both corners.
So the 25-foot is the standard setback on the 6th Street side. We have no problem with that, correct?
Correct.
And on the Webb Street side, we're not sure, or you're not sure, what the setback is of those two existing structures in order to line this up with anything.
No, I did not measure them. I would have to estimate based on the lining up our plot plan with the Google map that they're generally in alignment if we're closer than the wall of our building.
Okay, so if in fact those two properties were closer to the right of way, in effect had a, say, a 6-foot front yard setback, wouldn't it make sense to create a 6-foot setback on this property instead of 8?
I think the intention was to try to come up with a reasonable footprint that was as conforming as possible. That's why there was lengths taken to keep the main walls of the footprint, excluding the balconies, lined up, and it being at least as conforming or more conforming than the other properties along the same block front. So that was an attempt to minimize the amount of relief required.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess maybe I didn't phrase my question properly. That if, when push comes to shove, when this is built or when it's finalized, if this face, this Webb Street face, if it is substantially by a foot or more in front of or behind either of the neighbors, wouldn't it make sense to make them all line up?
Yeah, but I think the idea was to have these balconies also, so that the balconies probably line up with those buildings. The facade is probably behind the fronts of those buildings. So I think that given the type of design of the building and the attempt to try to use the balconies to provide some amenity space for the two units, that I can't see trying to expand the footprint, which it sounds like you're suggesting, because that would push the balconies closer to Webb Street.
Well, I think you had already testified that lining up the building faces is paramount, not whether the balconies line up or not. Yeah, you agree that porches vary in width. The porches and balconies vary in width. They're an architectural element that creates interest, correct?
I would say it depends on the architecture.
Okay, but in general,
I'm really not here testifying as an architect.
true, but as a planner with these setbacks and things lining up, it would stand to reason, I think you would agree, that the building faces lining up is much more significant than balconies lining up with things or porches lining up with things.
I would say it sounds like I could agree with that in general, but I think I'm kind of not sure where the direction of the question is going. So I would just say, depending on the circumstances, I would say that it could. That's probably the best answer I can give you.
Okay. So as far as floor area ratio that was testified to, are garages included? Is the ground floor non-living space included in the floor area ratio?
Well, most ordinances exclude that. I can't say whether, again, that would have been the testimony the architect would have given, but in most cases, garages are not counted as habitable space and therefore not counted in the floor area ratio. Donna could probably answer more specifically as far as how Asbury handles it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear from Donna, but let me ask a supplementary question. The space in the middle, which carries the staircase well, is that included in the floor area ratio?
In most cases, it would be, because it is part of access to habitable space. But again, you'd have to look at the definition of FAR in the Asbury Park ordinance. I don't have that in front of me, so I would defer on that.
Okay. Well, Donna did testify to that. Could she answer? Is that all right, Counselor?
If she wants to.
Donna, you with us?
This is Donna. I'm pulling up the definition section of the ordinance.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I'm curious as to whether the garage space, the unlivable garage space, is included in the calculation, and whether the that bottom area of the stairwell is included. So the definition of gross floor area, which is what we use in the calculation of the floor area ratio, shall mean the sum of the gross horizontal floors or stories of a building measured from the exterior face of the exterior walls
but not including areas devoted exclusively to off-street parking and loading space for motor vehicles, or any space where the floor-to-ceiling height is less than 7 feet.
Mhm. Okay, so it would seem that the stairwell space is included.
Are you testifying or asking a question?
Is the stairwell space included based on that definition? And has the floor area ratio of this project been properly calculated?
At this, I'm going to object. The architect provided the testimony with regard to floor area ratio. This witness did not testify as that's beyond the scope of his testimony. We're getting a little bit far afield at this point.
Well, actually, he did testify to that because in my notes.
Agreed. We'll let Donna answer one or two questions, and then we're
Okay.
going to get back to his testimony and get to the point and conclude the cross.
Okay, all right, let's see now. Just flipping my page over. All right, on slide 11. Okay, there was some testimony about the flood level and why the living space had to be as high as it is. What's the minimum point at which the actual living space can start?
I think Donna gave some testimony earlier on in terms of the difference between the grade elevation and the base elevation +1. It appears that it's a matter of some couple of feet, but I think what I responded to when I was cross-examined earlier by another member of the public is you still have to be able to get to that low level. If you were to lower this house to that point, you would definitely address part of the height issue, but then you're basically eliminating your parking. So in order to have the room for the parking under the building, it forces everything up, and there's no, I think what my testimony is there's no allowance for that difference in height as there are in most other ordinances that have been enacted in towns that were impacted by sand. That was the extent of my testimony.
Okay, all right. So it's a somewhat convoluted calculation depending on which standard is used, correct?
No, I think that the standard is BFE
Yes or no?
+1.
You don't have to elaborate.
Almost every town that has flood insurance.
Okay. All right, let's go to slide 12. You testified to building architecture, so fair game. All right, on slide 12, you make note of the Deal Lake Court complex there. Why choose an example that has no relation to this neighborhood whatsoever? This is several
Now
blocks.
you're offering an opinion. Ask him a question.
Okay,
You're
why?
saying it has no relation. We don't know
Okay.
that. That's your position.
Okay, Jack, thank you. Why choose a example of desirable architecture for this site, which is not within eyesight of this site?
I think what this slide does is it gives a quote from the redevelopment plan that indicates that, which would be applied to the renovation infill area as to appropriate architectural styles. And one of them that was listed was Art Deco streamlined. It's in the quote. And my point in referencing this, having remembered it from when I lived in town, was that it was very unique and very striking, and was the same style architecture, or at least comparable to what was being proposed here. So the point was that the architectural style that was chosen in this particular case would not be the only example of that in the renovation infill area. That was the extent of the point.
Okay. Are you aware that this quote that you pulled out applies only to the prime renewal area?
I'm not sure I agree with that. But even if it did, the fact that this particular property is not in the prime renewal area and is in the renovation infill area, I think makes it relevant. It's not obviously this is now considered to be a valued type of architecture by the city, and it's in the same portion of the area covered by the redevelopment plan as the subject property. So I think it is a relevant point to make. And that's about the best answer I can give without being argumentative.
Okay. Let's go to slide 13, the next one, existing zoning. Okay. Are you familiar with the local zoning? You testified to it via the slide and in your testimony there.
Yes.
So R2, okay. So are you familiar with a part of the land development ordinance called community design regulations?
Yes, I am.
Okay. That basically defines R2 areas as historic districts, does it not?
Yes, it was written probably somewhere around, if I recall correctly, somewhere between 1987 and 1990.
Okay. So if existing zoning applies in this area, why are those community design regulations not being followed?
Well, I think you'd have to look at the differences between the 1984 redevelopment plan and the 2000, whatever, 2002, 4, whatever redevelopment plan to see how as I mentioned before, how the redevelopment plan describes its relationship to the existing zoning. It could be that when that entire effort was done to basically do an overhaul of the redevelopment plan, that changed back when those community design standards were provided. There really wasn't any guidance for the existing neighborhoods in the renovation infill area. That was an attempt to try to, and that was also pre-Sandy when we had flood issue regulations. We never really thought about flood zone standards in those days. It was really an attempt to try to get infill development to incorporate a certain number of features that were found in existing development in the neighborhood. It was an attempt to try to get it to fit in and not look out of place. But then again, we're talking a difference of about 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I hope you're fairly familiar with the redevelopment plan because you've testified to it. Are you familiar with the section under the 2018 amendment that states that the renovation infill area is provided for context only and that all underlying zoning applies? You familiar with that section?
I think I remember seeing it. So I'm going to have to, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to have to take your word that you're reading from it.
Okay. So that kind of contradicts what you just said about.
Objection, no, it doesn't.
Doesn't?
No.
Well, either local zoning applies or it doesn't.
Ask
Correct?
questions. Ask questions during your.
Does the local?
Ask questions, and during your comments at the end, you can bring up these.
Thank you. Does the underlying zoning of the R2 district apply to this site?
I think in terms of lot bulk and height standards, yes. In terms of the community design standards, I can't answer that question because I haven't been part of the most recent changes to the ordinances and to the redevelopment plan.
Okay. All righty. Let's see, one other thing. Oh, the parking, the negative criteria, the detriment to the community that you testified to. Did you consider that the sizes of these curb cuts will eliminate on-street parking for the neighbors who have no other means of parking anywhere?
I would imagine that.
No, we stopped Mr. Mignoli
yes.
talking about curb cuts. We're not going to have you because
Dave
it goes beyond the scope of his testimony. Bring it out at the end when you're testifying.
All right. All right. Thank you, folks.
All right.
Now, Mr. Karras, you have another witness?
Yeah, I'm going to call Peter Siegel just to follow up on a few matters.
Before we go any further, Mr. Karras, I'm sorry, Jack. I'm afraid we're going to have to carry you, Mr. Karras. We've got to give fair time to the other applicant.
I can follow up the next hearing then with Mr. Siegel. That's fine.
If that's the case, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask to be excused.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts, for your testimony.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so if we're going to continue this to the next meeting date, which I don't know what our agendas look like. I have no clue of which.
I do. I
Oh,
do.
good.
Our next,
Okay, thank goodness. Okay. So,
the
why
next
don't we-
available meeting would, I'm sorry, Jack, the next available meeting for this application would be November 10th.
Does that work for you, Andy, and your witnesses?
Yeah, that's fine for me.
Okay, so let's get a motion without further notice to carry it to the 10th at 7 p.m., November 10th at 7 p.m. And Andy, would you state on the record that you'll extend the time within which the board has to decide the case?
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to carry the 306th Avenue application to November 10th, 2020 without further notice.
I'll second.
Seconded by Brittany Ashman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? No opposed, ayes have it. Matter carried to November 10th.
All right.
Okay, thank you very
Mr.
much,
Harrison.
everybody. Have a good night.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 5-minute recess, please?
I'll make a motion to take a 5-minute recess.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Okay, I'll call the roll. Russell, please unmute yourself, and everyone else who might be muted. Dan Harris.
Here.
Brittany Ashman. Brittany?
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay. Christopher Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay. Jill Potter.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Slick.
Here.
Russell Lewis.
Here.
Christopher Avalone.
Here.
Bonnie Knock. Catherine Minervini.
Here.
All are present and accounted for.
Thank you, Mr. Serpico. All right. So back to 704 4th Avenue. Welcome back, Mr. Santori.
Thank you so much. Just as a quick matter of housekeeping, I believe Mr. Lewis is recused from this application, correct?
That's true.
That is correct.
For the record, yes.
I just wanted to make sure because you called him in roll, and I just want to make sure everybody's
Yeah,
aware.
I call a roll for attendance for the start the meeting, but you're correct with he's recused from this one.
Okay. So where we last left off, just as a quick synopsis to get everybody kind of refocused, if you want me to start, we had last left off completing with our engineer, getting ready to testify to the previously supplied plans prior to the last hearing that were revised by the architect who is present with us this evening. Just as a quick way of background to accelerate some things, because I know it's already late tonight, we had submitted a revised site plan in response to some of the board's and obviously residents' questions as it pertained to some of the impervious surface. Getting back together with the team, if you note our revised site plan, we have taken the rear parking area and converted that to permeable pavers to reduce the amount of impervious surface in response to some of the questions and concerns that have been raised, which is a 2,083 square foot reduction of essentially impermeable surface on the property. That's just in the exhibits, and obviously that's just something that would be set forth on any finished plan that would potentially be voted on by the board. That said, I do want to move into the architectural testimony because I know it's late already. So if we could have the architect just re-advise that he's under oath from previous testimony because he did testify in a previous hearing.
Sure, but I'll swear him in again.
Okay.
Daniel, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Sure.
Tell us your relationship to the applicant. We already know that you've been pre-qualified at a previous hearing, so you don't have to go through your credentials.
Sure. Daniel Condator, C-O-N-D-A-T-O-R-E. I am the architect representing Tara and Johanna, hired to provide architectural services and design for the proposed 3-unit building.
Thank you.
Mr. Condator, can you take us through the changes, essentially the high-level changes that occurred from the first iteration of the plans that are the iteration of the plans that were submitted prior to the last meeting.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen now so you guys could see what we had submitted.
Thank you.
Please do. Let me see. Let me find the list of exhibits. Oh, I don't have that. A7. Irina, our records show that Irina had made the revised architectural plans as A7. Yeah, A7.
Okay, I have plans that are dated. I'm trying to scroll over there to the title block for you guys, which obviously I can't. $817 is the plans that you should have in file.
Okay.
Everybody can see my screen, correct? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're ready, I'll get started. The basic arrangement of the building has maintained is the same. The biggest change when we first presented our project, we did not in the original plans have a front porch, and there were some questions about putting the front porch on, and we presented at the end of the hearing, if you remember, a rendering, a visual of what an option would be to have the house fit in more with the surrounding environment. So from that, we went back and we revised the plans. Overall, the overall length of the building, in order to help with the parking arrangement in the back and the impact of the building on the site, is reduced by 3 feet. So their overall length went from 75 feet. Now we're down to 72 feet from front to back. That's the not including the 5-foot porch. So the building coverage remained over the allowable building coverage. So our building coverage currently is at 26.7, and the allowable is 25%. But that includes the front porch and the second story decks. The FAR, which was previously over and we were requesting a variance, that is no longer requested since we reduced the height of the basement to 6'11", and now we're actually at a 0.476 FAR, where a 0.5 is allowed. That's because we actually shrank the building. So we made a conscious effort to kind of squeeze the building as much as we could, squeeze the units the best that we could to fit within the site and still maintain, I think, a layout that was sufficient for my client. So you can see here on the first floor plans, on the left, I have the basement that is now 6'11". So this basement is not a habitable basement. It is a place where they can, we will put the laundry. So previously we had the laundry on the second floor, but we've moved the laundry area to the basement area. So this will be used for laundry and storage, and nothing more than that. So that was a difference from the original submission. On the first floor, which is where you enter, each unit you enter, we added a den to the area, or it can be also used as a dining room. And we have a full bath where we previously had a powder room. We kind of created a different kitchen layout that kind of addressed like where you would sit and eat and places for dining. And that's pretty consistent with all 3 units. On the second floor, we kind of reconfigured some space, and we have 2 full bedrooms, 1 master and 1 bedroom with an ensuite, some walk-in closets, and then the 2 units to the back. When you come up the top of the stairs, you have the porch and the outdoor sitting area that we discussed before that has remained in the plan. So those are really the basic changes to the floor plan from the original submission. I'll scroll down to the elevations. Some of the comments from before was obviously we didn't have a front porch on the building. So we've added that to the front to create a more traditional single family. I mean, the idea overall is to make it feel when you're walking down the street, to be consistent with the single family lots that are adjacent to us and further down the block going east. So this is the updated front elevation with the front porch, a gable entry. There were some comments by Don about balancing the elevation more, aligning windows, and we did that. You know, we have different dichotomy of materials, from hardy siding to shakes, some board and batten at the top, some standing seam metal roof. So really create a variety of materials. I think that adds to the architecture. And then on the east elevation along the driveway, this was updated to remove the porch that was closest to the street for that front unit. So again, when you're visualizing and walking down the street, this porch here is we felt was too close, too visible, too much of an impact. So we felt that by removing that and just having their outdoor space to be the front porch on the first floor, it would make it more consistent with other houses along the block. And again, there's questions about aligning windows. I still see a door that is off, which we will definitely adjust. And then these are just updates, basically adding, you can see the porch and elevation, but this is the elevation in between the two houses. So you could see, we're not just addressing the front. We feel that we're doing a good job of using the change in materials to break up the elevation on the side elevations to address the neighbors, so they're not just getting a single-sided building with one type of siding. So we felt like that was a bonus that we put together. So really, those are the overall changes to the plans. And then I just kind of want to go back to the rendering. So this is what kind of derived that elevation. And one of the things that I just wanted to bring up as I looked, and to me, when you look at the blocks in this area, there's a difference between the corner lots and then the lots that are interior. And along this, even on the south side of the street, even on the next block over, there's 3 or 4 houses that fit this, motif of gable facing A-frame that is more narrow and goes straight back on the interior lots, as opposed to the corner lots that have more detail. Because obviously they're addressing both streets and they have more wraparound porches. So we felt like this design that we put together was more consistent with these interior lots. So this is kind of where we left off. And you can see now that we don't have that front porch, the first porch is set, well back from the facade, so when you're walking down the sidewalk, it's not prominent. And we think overall it's consistent. Has a lot of texture and material, and it's a good fit for the neighborhood.
And Daniel, I guess just as a quick question, and I know you mentioned this about the planner's report.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as you indicated, some of the window alignments, changes in material, porches, examples, a lot of the stuff that you used to go back to the drawing board to create this iteration was pulled from the planner's report. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I don't have any other real direct questions. We spent a lot of time on the architecture the first time, and I know those were the changes. And I like I said, and for the benefit of the board, to open it up to the board for any particular items. I don't want to belabor things that everybody already knows. You guys are
Mr. Conditori, do you have any other views of the actual structure like this that shows us all angles of the structure, or no?
I don't have any. No, I do not. This is a close-up that I have of that side. The right side is pretty straight with the windows, so I didn't include anything there. So I don't have anything additional. But, what we're proposing on the front, we feel is consistent as it goes down the side with the breakup and the split of the materials. We have the board and batten on the side elevations as well, and enhancing those gables. I can actually I know I don't have a rendering, but that's the side elevation where you can see we have the shake style with the band, and then we're addressing this gable differently with the board and batten, a little bit of the crown detail over the windows. So, but I do not have additional images. I'm sorry.
That's okay. From what I could see, there are two entrances on what, the south side of the building or
That is the east side of the building.
the east side of the building?
Yes. So, that goes back to the original testimony about, we felt it was a more desirable layout for the person renting to have a multi-story unit as opposed to stacking units on top of each other, more privacy for themselves.
And if I understand you correctly, you now have permeable pavers that will allow the water to percolate through?
I think, August, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's really from the engineer, but yes, as we put in the revised site plan, we, as I indicated, 2,083 feet, the whole rear portion, as is referenced on the site plan exhibit that was submitted, is now permeable paver.
Right. Well, the engineer, the last time he spoke, Mr. Santori, they were not permeable. So since it was,
that's why I used that as the introduction. I just was, instead of revisiting his.
I know. Well, since we cannot call back your engineer, somebody has to answer the question, right?
Yeah, sure.
So the pavers are starting at the back, the back elevation, and the front from the street down to the back is going to be asphalt?
Correct.
Okay.
Wasn't there some mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I know this isn't what was testified, but wasn't there going to be some kind of roof gutters?
Yep, there will be roof gutters and it will be tied to an underground system. That's correct. They're not on the rendering, but they will be. The downspouts will be connected.
Okay. Are you going to bring back your engineer?
We can at some point in time, for sure. We still have to get to the planner, I think, but we've already testified to the fact that we were going to tie all that into the system. Is there a specific question? I mean, he is on the meeting for tonight, but I want to try and stick with the architect if we could. Is there a question for the engineer about the gutter?
I guess I can wait.
Okay.
I have no other questions for the architect.
Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mr. Conditori?
No, I don't.
All right. Board professionals, do you have any questions for Mr. Conditori?
Oh, by the way, board professionals, can I get you back up there so I can see you? I don't know how to, you're gone. You were there and you're gone.
Mrs. Donna, I think Dan has to stop sharing his screen.
Oh, sorry.
Here we are.
Donna and Doug.
Now everybody disappeared. What is going on here?
I see everybody fine.
You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing.
Everybody go.
I do.
Please state your names for the record and your affiliation with the board.
Donna Miller, board planner.
Thank you.
Doug Cleland, board engineer.
Thanks. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Jack.
I need help. Here's the weird shit.
Tim, could you mute yourself? Do either of you have any questions for Mr. Conditori?
This is Donna. I don't.
All right. So then we will open it up to the public for cross-examination to Mr. Conditori. Andy, do we have anybody in the public who would like to ask Mr. Conditori a question?
We do. I have Joel up first.
Thank you. Mr. Conditori, your rendering is very nice looking.
Please state your name first and your address.
Please, thank you.
Sure. Joel Cohen from 708 4th Avenue.
Thank you.
The rendering is really nice looking, and I appreciate the way that you've changed the outside of the building, the shakes and the tiling. But have you ever tried to impose the rendering with the actual neighborhood in the sense of the closeness of the buildings so that we could see the houses on either side?
I haven't done that. I mean, it takes quite a bit of effort. So if it's something that is needed, it's possible, but I have not done that. I mean,
Okay.
this house, the original house that was there, just to go back, was less than a foot from the side yard, and we've moved it over to comply with
Right.
the setbacks.
That's what I was getting at. I guess just that one of the changes that you've made is significant in the sense that of its space next to the house on the west side.
Correct.
And of course, that would impact the driveway and the house on the east side. So that was something that I think would be important in the rendering.
Okay.
You made comments about this trying to make it seem like it's a single family house to be able to fit in. Was it ever a suggestion to just make it a single family house?
I would just indicate that obviously that's not the scope of the application. The application that's before the board is as is submitted. And it's not.
And on the same context, thank you, Mr. Santori. On the same context, you said that you wanted it to make a rendering or some of these changes to feel good for the neighborhood. In that process, did you ever consult with anyone in the neighborhood?
No, I have not. I've just, visited the streets, and my office is in Asbury, so I'm familiar with the area and I'm familiar with the city, and I have a good understanding of the architecture.
Okay, thanks. And Mr. Santori, I don't know if this is an engineering question. Questions related to the driveway, they're not for Mr. Contadori?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you have any other further questions, Mr. Cohen?
No, thank you. Not for Mr. Contadori.
All right, thank you. All right, Andy, next person.
Okay, next we have Edward.
Edward Baumgarten, 706 4th Avenue. I have a few questions for Mr. Contadori. You had mentioned that the coverage was 26.7. Can you explain what that means?
So the allowable building coverage is 25%, and we are 26.7%.
What does building coverage mean?
Building coverage is the footprint of the structure, including the covered porch and the open decks on the second floor.
On the entire piece of property, Mr. Baumgarten.
So I'm sorry. I'm still not understanding that. So it's so building coverage is the size of the footprint of the building plus any porches. Is that it?
And decks.
And decks. Decks include balcony?
Yes, uncovered or covered, doesn't matter.
Does it include driveway?
No.
Okay. And I'm sorry, so you said it was 26.7 and what was allowed? What was?
25.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to that rendering because it is a lovely rendering, quite beautiful, and it shows the house in an endless field and grove of forests. Is there and I know you said that it might have been difficult to put it in context, but did you think about putting it in context, or is this in fact, has this property always been envisioned of ignoring everything else around it?
I would object to the characterization of the question.
Yeah.
Sustained.
You can only answer if he put it into context. He can't answer your statement. The other thing was a statement, so the other part of it. So he couldn't answer that.
About putting it into context?
No, that was the first part of it. Your conclusion. The
So
second half of your
the
question.
rendering is not showing the house in context, but my thought process in designing the house is in context of the neighborhood.
So let's talk about that context for a second. the number of siding materials that you're using on that, what is that based upon? Is
An aesthetic that I worked with the homeowner to put together. I mean, there's a variety of housing materials within the neighborhood. Some have, one type of siding that's wrapped around all four sides. I felt that using a multitude of siding materials brings a better detail to the architecture.
Right, but the choice of those siding materials, what were those?
A personal preference?
Process behind the actual, those actual materials.
My design aesthetic that I put into the project. That's nothing more than that.
Okay, so it wasn't really based upon anything in the neighborhood.
Object.
And I don't understand that.
Never testified to that.
About the choice of siding materials?
Try to rephrase your question so that he can understand it, please.
Okay. In choosing the siding materials, did you or did you not use the existing housing stock as points of reference?
Are you questioning the style or the actual material itself, like cedar?
The actual material itself. That's what I think I said.
The actual material. So we're using newer materials that are better constructed or made to withstand the weather than previous materials. I mean, there's asbestos siding on many houses over there. I'm not gonna, reuse that in this neighborhood. There is wood siding, but we are in a modern era and we have modern materials that last longer, that create the same aesthetic as some of the previous materials that were used, when these houses were built 100 years ago. So I think it's well within the context of the neighborhood.
But yet you're showing things like board and batten, which don't exist anywhere in the neighborhood. So that's really what my question is about.
So that's a style. Yes, I understand that, and I felt that the style worked. I mean, there's a huge variety of things that within blocks of this house. I can't identify anything one in particular that is the driving force. So there's a palette to pull from, and I pulled from it.
Well, that's the heart of my question. What palette? Because it's not anything that's on the block that I can see. So I'm asking.
I think I answered it the best that I could. So
okay.
I don't know how else to finish that.
Okay, that's fine. And so on the west side of the structure, of the proposed structure, there are, I wasn't able to count how many windows. What was the, but there are a lot on that west side.
Sure.
That west side, of course, faces is fairly close to the 706 house. What's the purpose of having that many windows on that side? It's not going to be light.
No. Let him answer the question.
Light and air. Windows are something that we want to introduce. We want to introduce natural light into the house. We want to introduce air and ventilation. So,
but no natural light gets in there.
No, you're not asking a question. Now you're testifying.
I'm sorry.
No, that's purposely, especially now with, you see what we're going through, circulation and air movement is important. So.
Okay. So the consideration of the 8 feet that the house is, that it faces, that 8-foot distance really doesn't come into play.
The house proposes within the proper setback. We're not asking or seeking a variance on the side yard.
Right. I'm not asking about the setback. I'm asking about the about the purpose of that many windows.
I believe I answered that.
You asked the question, he answered it.
Okay.
Mr. Baumgarten, do you have any other questions?
I'm just checking my notes to
Okay, all
make,
right.
just make sure I've got it covered.
No problem. You're good. You're good.
Yep. Yeah, I keep coming back to the character of the neighborhood, which is what you say you keep bringing the house closer to, and yet on these on that side elevation, it really isn't anything close to the neighborhood. So
now you're testifying.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Yeah,
It's easy
yeah,
for
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. I'm
I've
trying
been
to
a lawyer
inform.
42 years. I get it.
Yeah. How does the how does that east side of the proposed structure fit in with the character of the neighborhood?
I think if you look at several houses on that block, on the south side, particularly if you go to 604, 608, or 610 on that street, these houses are, gable fronted houses, and they're straight back on the sides. They don't have any bump outs or cross gables. So like I said, I feel for the proportions of the site and the property similar in this area, I feel it fits within the context.
Okay, you mentioned the 600 block. Is that?
It's within 300-400 feet.
Okay, fine. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I knew what you were referring to. That's all the questions I have for the architect.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgarten.
Thank you.
Andy, please go the next person.
Okay, next we have Jonathan Pickard.
Good evening. This is John Pickart. I'm a homeowner at 701 4th Avenue, which is across the street from the subject property. Just have a few questions. First, you testified about the proposed lot coverage of 26.7%. What's the current lot coverage of the existing use?
I do not know that offhand. I can look if you give me a second. Um, 11.8%.
Okay, so you're
That's
looking
building. Let's just back up. It's building coverage, not lot coverage.
Okay, building coverage.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
So you are looking to more than double the building coverage from its existing use. Is that right?
That's what's proposed.
Okay. In the plans, you testified about some rooms that are designated on the plans as dens and said they could be dens or they could be dining rooms. Each of those rooms has a closet in it, right?
Correct. Yes.
So they also could be bedrooms, right?
I suppose so.
Okay.
Yes.
So these could, and you don't have a lot of dining rooms that have closets in them, do you?
Well, it's also used as like a linen closet. I mean, or not a linen closet, but like a hall closet for coats, jackets, shoes. We don't have a closet in that floor any other place.
Okay, so there is no hall closet in the design. Is that right?
That's correct. We put that closet in the den.
Okay, and if those rooms are used as bedrooms, you would then have 3 units each with 3 bedrooms in them, correct?
That would be a fair statement.
Okay, so you'd be looking at 9 bedrooms in the single building across 3 units, right?
Correct.
Okay. You testified about the fact that in your view, this was designed to be in keeping with the neighborhood. The design, I know there's been a lot of talk around whether these are technically townhouses or not technically townhouses. I'm not really inviting sort of that discussion, but there's certainly townhouse style with the entrances on the side opening onto the drive. What were you point to in the neighborhood to suggest that townhouse style design is in keeping with the neighborhood?
Well, the houses to the east are in single family R1 zones, I believe. So this is a different zone. So we're trying to, the idea of the design is to bridge that transition from a multi-unit zone being adjacent to a single family zone and kind of merge those two together. So you're not going to find a townhouse style to the east because they don't exist. And that's not what those properties are zoned for. So
this zone is, I think the boundaries of this zone are Fifth and Asbury and Grand and Main Street, right?
I believe so. I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to
Okay,
double
so
check.
what is in that zone, that being the zone that's at issue here, did you rely upon to conclude that townhouse style design would be in keeping with this zone?
For the architectural style or how the houses, the units are laid out?
The architectural style. Are there other townhouse style developments?
Why do we keep
in this
why do we
neighborhood?
keep referring to this as a townhouse style development if it's been determined that it's not a townhouse?
Well, my understanding is that it's a townhouse for some purposes and not a townhouse for other purposes. I'm just talking about the architectural
No, it's been
style.
determined by law that it's not a townhouse. Doesn't fit within the definition. And you keep, if you keep referring to it as such, I'm going to prevent you from doing that.
In concluding that this design that has the entrances, has multiple entrances for different units opening up onto a driveway that goes down the side of the building, are there other dwellings in that design that are right in this neighborhood that makes this in keeping with the neighborhood?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So it could be, there could be not. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay.
And I just to clarify, Mr. Contador, you didn't prepare any specific study or information regarding that particular question or point, correct?
No.
So when you said this was in keeping with the neighborhood, you weren't relying upon some study you had performed with respect to that issue, correct, sir?
I did not study, I didn't perform a study to find out if there's other townhouses in the neighborhood, no.
Okay. Now, with respect to the second floor balconies, appreciate that you moved or got rid of one of those balconies, so you only have second floor balconies on the side of the house for the rear two units. Are there other dwellings in the neighborhood that you relied upon in finding that that would be consistent with the you know how the neighborhood units are constructed?
I did not.
Okay. And I think you said that the reason why you got rid of the balcony towards the front was so to decrease whether those balconies would be visible from people on the street, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now the balconies are on the east side of the building, right?
Yes.
Immediately to the east, and I know you've been asked questions about the rendering, which I agree was very nicely done, but immediately to the east of this lot would be 702 4th Avenue, except there is no 702 4th Avenue, right?
I don't know if that garage in the back is a part of that 702 or not. I don't know that determination.
But where there would be a 702, there's no building there, right? It's empty. There's a house on the corner at 700, and then there's nothing in between that house and the subject property, right?
There's a space, but I don't know whose property it is, and there's other buildings back there. I don't know how that's all configured.
So when someone is walking down the street by the subject property, with respect to those balconies towards the rear of the building, there's empty space there that would make those readily visible from anybody who is walking, up 4th Avenue, right?
I believe there's a pretty substantial existing tree buffer that's there now along the property line.
You think that there's a tree buffer that would prevent those balconies from being visible?
There's existing trees along that property line that are, I feel there's a lot of growth.
Have you done any study as to the visibility of those balconies from the street?
From that perspective, no.
Okay. Now, with respect to a building that has 3 residential units in it, and so on the scale of that building, are there other buildings on the block that have 3 residential units in it that you're aware of?
Not, there's other multifamilies, but I'm not sure what's in what. I've not gone through to see how many units are in each.
Nor have you testified to any of that, correct? It's beyond the scope of any of your testimony that you provided so far.
That's correct.
Okay. Are you prepared to testify, or have you testified as to whether this development would be consistent or inconsistent with the master plan adopted by
Objection, it's not the plan.
December 2017?
That's an improper question of the witness.
Okay, you're not testifying as to consistency with the master plan. Is that
I am
right?
not the
That would be
planner.
testimony of a planner. He's an architect.
Okay. Then I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. Please call the next person.
Okay, next we have Peter and Ray.
Hello, can you hear me? It's Peter.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure, Peter Connolly and Ray Hunt. We're at 710 4th Avenue.
Please proceed.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you, Daniel, for, I do think the improvements to the architecture, they're headed in the right direction. So we do appreciate that. With respect to your rendering, just returning to that, you have the trees placed on the outside of the fence versus on the inside of the fence. Is that how you anticipate the final build to be?
No, there was a landscape plan that was submitted by the civil engineer that supersedes what I put in a rendering.
So the rendering does not match what you anticipate the final build to be?
No, it's far short. My renderings are focused on the architecture, not the actual landscape plan that was proposed.
So would you characterize that as misstating how the plan will be?
No, I do not.
You do not characterize it as misstating how the plan will be, but it doesn't represent how the plan will be.
What I just stated was that my renderings are focused on the architecture of the building, and I am telling you up front that the landscaping is not what I included in that rendering. So
you didn't take the landscaping into consideration, but you included it in what you shared with the group tonight.
it's generic.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Generic. Very good. Excellent to know. So you did not consider that in your rendering. Good to know. With regard to the west side of the building, you've testified earlier that this is quite an increase to the existing footprint, and it's over the allowed amount. You're going coverage of 26.7 and allowed is 25. So you have a very long sight line along the west side of the building. And that's a sight line to 710, 708, 76, and I think those 3. Have you considered breaking that up with materials in some sort of kind of slightly more artistic way? Because right now it's just one material running the whole length of that very long building.
I felt that we, did that with the breaking up of the siding, using the different materials and transitioning from what we used on the front instead of just using a single material on the side. We're still using the same window treatments. So we felt that was a decent proposal for that side of the house.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is your answer yes or no? Did you consider breaking up the materials on that side and the west side of the house?
I felt I did.
Okay, you felt you did, but you decided that one material would be best.
It's not one material. There's several materials. We have clapboards, we have shingles. There's a
one
band.
material siding.
Yeah, it's all the same physical material.
I'm not judging it. I'm actually not judging it. I'm just
No, I'm
asking.
saying it's all the same physical material, right? Like we're proposing hardy siding. So some of
Yeah.
it's hardy shake, some of it's hardy clapboard, some of it's hardy board and batten. So it's all the same material, but it's different styles of that material.
Not on the west side. On your rendering on the west side, it's one consistent material on the siding. Are you changing your claim there? Did you want to show that again?
Yeah, I could show it if you guys want me to show it real fast. So we have shakes, and then we break it up with a band. And this is a
Let
clapboard.
him answer the question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't share.
No, you answer your question. No need to interrupt.
So I believe we do have more than one material on the side.
On the west side.
Correct.
Okay. That's not my recollection, so that's fine, but I guess I'm not allowed to see the presentation again, so I guess that'll do.
Share the screen.
Yeah, I can share it real fast. It's not.
Bring it up.
No or yes?
Yes, bring it up.
Oh, okay, sorry. No problem. Sorry. So we have the shakes on the upper portion. We have
Excellent.
a 12-inch band, and we have the clapboards going down the side. And we also are continuing, window trim around the windows.
Excellent. Thank you for showing it again. I needed to refresh. It's been a long
No problem.
as many people will attest, it's been a long evening. Okay, and let me just glance at my notes because, okay, so, and then functionally in the basement, you're reducing from 7 feet to 6 something that I can't recall.
6'11".
Right. So is there functionally any difference to that, or is that just?
Well, it can't be used as a habitable space under 7 feet, and that's consistent
Gotcha.
with the building code.
Okay, great. That's excellent. Okay. Sorry, just let me glance at my sloppy late night notes. Okay. No, I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any further questions, Peter?
No, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. All right. So let's move on to the next person. Andy, please call the next person.
We have city historian.
Hello, folks. Warner Baumgartner, Fifth Avenue, Asbury Park, appearing as city historian. Just 2 quick items, or 3 actually. It sounds to me like you're quite familiar with the community design regulations that are published as part of the land use ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, working with Donna.
Okay, great. What is the angle of the gable at the top of the roof there?
I believe we have a 10-12 or an 12-12. I don't know it off the top of my head.
That's a substantial difference. You don't know what it is at this point?
Mr. Baumgartner, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I just have to make an announcement to Jack. Jack?
Yes.
Christopher Gonzalez had a little problem, so he left the meeting.
Okay. Noted for the record.
All right?
Thank you.
So I said to him through email that he could see the rest of the meeting at a later point.
Yeah, and he can give us a certification if he does.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. All right. I'm sorry, Mr. Baumgartner.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just wondering what the angle of the gable is at the top there.
12-12.
Oh, 12-12.
Are you aware that the design regulations state an acute angle, which is less than 90 degrees? Would you be willing to change that to conform?
Sure.
Okay. What is the depth of the porch at the front of the house?
5 feet.
Did you do any analysis or any study of what typical porches are in the immediate surrounding neighborhood there, the depth?
No, that's what's allowable from my recollection in the zoning ordinance
Okay.
for encroachment on the porch.
Are you aware that the design regulations state a porch consistent with other porches in the immediate area?
Okay.
And are you aware that the typical porch depth in that area is between 8 to 10 feet?
Now you're testifying.
I asked them. That was a question.
I was not aware that
You're saying they're 8 to 10 feet?
No,
I was not aware that.
Yeah, you're giving us testimony and then you want him to affirm or not affirm it.
I'm being lawyerly, Jack.
No, you're not being lawyerly, you're testifying.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have, at some point, I'm gonna swear you in and I'm gonna ask you where you got that information.
Okay.
But not now.
All right. Let's see. Those are the only two issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgartner. All right. Andy, please call the next person.
Okay, next we have Lauren Scheller.
Hi, this is Lauren Scheller. I live at 708 4th Ave.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my first question is procedural. Do we have access to a copy of the plans that were presented?
Yes, they're all online, Ms. Scheller, at the City of Asbury Park website.
Okay. When did those go up in advance of the meeting?
Thursday night, they're there.
Okay, thank you. I just don't want to repeat any questions already asked. Mr. Conditori used the word squeezing in the units. So I just wanted to understand what that was in reference to, what you meant by squeezing.
The original units that we submitted at the original application were larger than we are proposing now. So we reduced the size of the units to reduce the impact on the site.
Okay. Did you, in this thread of like keeping with the style of the neighborhood, did you think of having the balconies be like recessed into the house, as opposed to being like balconies be like covered? Because there was a lot of issues around lighting and spread of lighting.
I did not look at recessing the balconies into the house.
Okay. Mr. Santori had said something in the beginning really quickly, and I thought we were listening to Mr. Conditori's testimony today. So I just was a little bit confused about what Mr. Santori was saying and if that was part of today's testimony or not.
Not testimony, just by way of background of the application, ma'am. I indicated that in our revised site exhibit so that the board could be focused on some of the stuff that we covered. We had submitted a revised site plan, and that revised site plan, in response to some questions from the neighbors and the board, resulted in us removing 2,083 square feet of impermeable surface, and we changed it to permeable pavers. And that's the plan that's, on file with the board. It was just by way of orientation, nothing more.
Okay, so is that like contextual information, or was that new information where we need someone to testify about it?
It's the plan that we have submitted. It's the existing site plan that's on file with the town at this point in time. There's nothing to testify. It is what it is. It's a matter of fact.
Okay. Are we getting testimony from the engineer again since there was changes?
Not at this time. Right now, we're still right now we're focusing on Mr. Contador. It's possible, depending upon how many hearings we come back to, whether if there's any other questions, we have these individuals here to make sure that the board's questions and professionals' questions are answered. But we don't have an intention to introduce them at this point.
Okay, thank you. The rest of my questions were answered with previous questioning.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Scheller. All right, let's move on. Andy, call the next person.
Okay, we have phone, looks like ending in 350.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Manoli.
Ernest Manoli, 4 Deal Lake Drive, apartment 5B, Asbury Park, New Jersey. So the expert witness is the architect, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you mentioned about this squeezing. I guess you're accommodating from, are you accommodating from earlier meetings the request that the building may be have too large a footprint, and that your accommodation is you made it a certain amount of square feet footprint smaller? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is that as to the footprint, or does that also affect the height? Or what does it affect mostly, the width, the height, or all the above?
Not the height, but the length and the overall size of the units.
Okay. But it doesn't change the way the building faces or the balconies or the entrances. It's just, you kind of shrunk the whole thing, correct?
Correct.
Well, just for clarification, Mr. Contador, that's not exactly correct, because we obviously changed the front porch style from the first meeting.
Yes.
Correct. And we also removed one of the balconies, correct?
Yes, I was just addressing the size of the units.
I just wanted to make sure, because it's a general point of view he was indicating.
Okay.
Okay. So what shrunk basically? Everything, or the living space? Meaning, other than the balconies and the footprint, did the living space shrink, or is it mostly the outer accoutrement like balconies and things like that? I mean, how did you shrink the overall footprint?
The enclosed length of the building was reduced by 3 feet, and that square footage was taking out of each unit respectively. So it was,
Okay, so basically you took a foot out of each unit. There's 3 units, correct?
Correct.
You took a foot out of each unit, and that building tends to face, I guess it's rectangle looking at the street into the property, correct? So with the driveway and the parking in the back. You didn't change any of that. You just kind of shortened the building by 3 feet.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And did you do that in regard to comments as to, I guess, by people who live within a few hundred feet, that the building looked a little bit large and kind of out of context with the style and the size on a lot relative to the nearby and across the street neighbors? Was that the accommodation you were trying to make, to kind of appease that they thought the way it is, it's a little big, and you said, well, I'm going to take 3 feet off and it's a little smaller, and let's see how you like that? Is that the essence of what happened?
I would object to the question for this particular witness. The determination of that is made by the applicant, not by the architect. The architect takes its direction from the applicant as to, in response to a meeting. So I know it's a question generally, but it's really not, it's not Mr. Contador's determination as to what he decides to do.
Okay. Did the owner direct you to figure out a way to make the building a little smaller?
We worked to address the comments from the previous hearings. So there's a multitude of things that we did, that I presented, that address many points.
Okay.
It's not just one point.
Oh, okay. I thought that's what I said. So based on previous comments, the owner directed you to make an accommodation somehow, and you did that. You made the building 3 foot smaller.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Relative to you as an architect, and tonight, your testimony is strictly about the building, right? Does it still include any of the architecture of the driveway, the lot, the relationship of the building, where it's placed? Is that in the engineer's purview, your purview? In other words, what can I ask you about the overall development? Or are you specifically tonight relegated to just the architectural of the building itself and the modifications that you made, which is you cut 3 foot off the side? I mean, what can I ask you? Can I ask you
Oh,
about
you don't
the
ask
yard
him
and
that
parking?
We answer that question. You can ask
You
him
answer that.
question. We answer that question. You can ask him questions. The way you characterize it is correct, based on his testimony as an architect only, and then based on the testimony he gave this evening.
Okay, except that didn't someone, Mr. Architect, didn't someone ask you a question about the architecture of the yard or the landscape? And you said, well, that's not me. Are you saying that you're the building architect and then there's a landscape architect? Is that correct or no?
Do not have a specific landscape architect. That's a part of the civil submission.
Part of the civil, okay. So when someone asks you about something about the yard and the trees and the fence and et cetera, you seem to say, well, I'm testifying about the building.
That's
So
correct.
I'm just wondering, can I ask you a question about the parking, the yard, and what the 3 feet did impact on the rest of your
That was all
development?
part of that was all part of the engineering part of the testimony. This is the architect, Mr. Manoli.
Okay. So what you're saying is, if I have questions about, now that there's been a change of 3 feet in the building, wouldn't it mean that the engineer has to testify again?
For the record,
we-
the change on the 3 feet in the building occurred before the last meeting. It's the same building. We just never reached the architect. And now we're just talking about the architectural components of the building. We never reached that testimony. So the building has not changed since the last application, since the last meeting.
Well, correct. Didn't you state that the building is now smaller? Didn't you say that tonight?
The building was changed prior to the last meeting, in which time you guys questioned the engineer for hours, and nothing's changed since then. He's just now testifying to the architecture. This is the architect. That's it.
Excuse me, that's my pacemaker.
Mine too.
So, well, so again, can I ask you the 3 feet that you cut off the building architecturally, regardless of who instructed you, that's not the issue. Where did you take that from? The street
You
view?
already answered that question.
What was the answer? Where did it come
Oh,
from?
we're not going to repeat the answer. He answered the question. He told you what he did, that he took the 3 feet off and where he took it from. He answered your question already.
Oh, he told me back, side, or
No,
the
you don't
front
have
or
to
the back.
repeat to me. You just move
Okay.
on to the next question.
All right, I'm glad. Yeah, I know. You wouldn't want him to repeat that. Maybe I missed it, but don't let him repeat it. So, is it your testimony that the reason that the basement has a 6 foot height is so that it can't be or won't be, or there couldn't be an application to ever make that livable? I guess, is that in perpetuity, or how does that work?
That's not part of his testimony.
No, he didn't say that.
Okay. Did you testify that the basement is 6 feet, not 7, so that no one could live there?
No, I said that it's not habitable space.
Yeah. Can you please
I
indicate?
think habitable means live there. Okay. Not, and from an architectural point of view, does not habitable mean it can't be a rec room? It can't be anything that would use, that's part of what's considered living space. Is that correct? Like,
That's correct. You can't, 6'11" is not considered habitable space under the building code.
oh, okay. All right. Can I ask you why, as an architect, it's not 7 feet?
Because it's not habitable space.
Well, how many feet is it now?
It's 6'11", so it's a lot. It's
Okay.
storage in a laundry room.
Okay. Architecturally, could you get another inch somehow?
It's
I can
That's
do that.
irrelevant, Mr. Minoli.
Okay, look, I'm just asking. 1 inch is not that much. Just think if you can get another inch somewhere from
You're
the floor of the.
testifying again. You're testifying.
Well,
do that.
hey,
You're going
Mr. Azalone, you want to relax a little bit. You know, you're pretty rude
You
to
either
the public.
stop that talk to me, or I'm going to mute you again. That's all.
Well, I was talking to Azalone, not
Mute
you,
him.
or whatever his
Mute
name
him
is.
now. I'm not going to argue. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to sit here and argue with Mr. Mignoli over nothing.
Agreed.
He wants to come back on, ask questions of the witness by all means, but I'm not going to argue with him over nonsense points. Just not going to do it.
Andy, please unmute him. And Mr. Minoli, please ask a relevant question to the architect's testimony.
Yeah, here's one to your testimony. When I ask you a question architecturally, why do you let the attorney in the chair badger us?
Objection. Don't answer that question.
Good,
We have the
so-
right to interpose objections to questions.
Listen, hey, Mr. Jack,
Ask
why don't you
relevant
just cut me
questions.
off? Because everybody's going to
Mute
listen
him,
to this
Andy.
recording.
Mute him.
Mute him.
Mute him. Let's move on.
I'm done with him for
Let's
tonight.
move on.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
We are not doing a second round of questions. So,
Okay.
Mr. Cohen, I see your hand is raised again,
No.
and this is not for a second round of questions. I believe that's all we have. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, it appears Mr. Cohen and Mr. McNulty are the only two with the hands raised.
Okay. So it is now past 10:30, and looks like, Mr. Santori, we're going to carry you.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I do appreciate you guys sticking out till 10:30 and getting through this witness. I thank you so much. I know it's been a long night, and we're certainly available at when the board is next available to have us.
Yeah, the next available date would be November 10th. You would be the second in line.
Okay. And at that point in time, we'll be moving forth with our planner, Mr. Leff.
Okay, so I will make a motion to carry your application 704 4th Avenue to November 10th, 2020 without further notice.
If I may, Mr.
And-
Chairman, as a condition of that, Mr. Santori, you consent to extension of time under the MLUO for the board to make its decision?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right, let's have a
You too,
motion.
Mr. Center.
That
I'll
was
have a
your
motion,
Christopher?
a motion to adjourn the meeting.
No, wait
Thank you.
a minute.
No.
Is your motion to carry it? without-
Yes.
I second.
And Brittany seconded? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. The matter's carried without further notice until the 10th of November.
And I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.